We are live here at
Hello.
Garland Farms. Antiwarmindset.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody out there?
Yeah, we're here to discuss some more vegan propaganda and also maybe react to another Earthling ad video or Joey Carbstrong video because they have been pumping out a lot of propaganda. They seem to be very desperate, it seems, because they're ramping up their rhetoric and they seem to be very radical as of late.
They really have picked up the pace of their activities, and all of the little smaller minions of the group, like David Rams. He's starting to do what looks like staged so-called debates in the street. It looks like two vegans, one's pretending to be a meat eater. And so the vegan that's playing the meat eater, he's got some ridiculous opposition to veganism, something that can be debunked really easily, or make a meat eater, make all meat eaters by association look like idiots.
Yeah,
Is that
they usually say something like, "Oh, it's cultural thing that we eat meat," or "It's taste pleasure," or "It's I don't care about animals," or anything like that. Then you know that these people are debating fake actors, basically.
yes? That's what I'm seeing. That's my opinion. When I look at it, I think that anyone that, I mean, is taking things on the internet at face value always going to work out on truth's favor? You're right. What are the chances? These people are corporate. They're corporately funded, right? You pointed out Blue Horizons. Do you think that Blue Horizons? I think that they they were one of the major players in $150 million that went to Ag Biome, a pesticide company. Do you think a company that's got $150 million to spend on a side project is going to leave things up to chance for the vegan influencer that they publicly admit that they directly fund?
No, of course not. It's all calculated. I mean, the venture capitalists behind that, they call themselves the vegan mafia even, right? And I think that is very apt
Ellie?
description.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what is the first thing that you wanted to? You're like um, you're the type of subscriber that, and I think that you were a subscriber for a while, weren't you? Before
Mhm.
you started working on this. I've got a partner that can help do this research and help present it. And there's really no other two entities that's really cutting on that Achilles heel, like Garland Farms and Antiwarmindset. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen that many um, people talking at length about crop deaths. Although I've seen today that the author of a book called "The Great Plant-Based Con," I forgot the author's name, but she had an interview on some podcast, and she was saying that in a vegan world, we would be in a nutritional deficit, and thus we would have to grow more plants, which is something that we both have been talking about ad nauseum. So this is actually a very important argument that is finally getting through the ether, so to speak. I think this is, but she didn't address the whole crop deaths issue directly, but she was talking about that more crops would be required in a vegan world, which is true. Yeah,
So
yeah. This author, right, Jane Buxton.
Okay. Jane Buxton. Did you read this?
No, not yet, but I'm going to.
Okay. The Great Plant-Based Con: Why Eating a Plants-Only Diet Won't Improve Your Health or Save the Planet. Yeah, we need to definitely review that book. Read it and review it.
Yeah. Although I've seen that there's some vegan copium already on plant-based news by Plant Chompers. Chris McCaskill, he did a review of this book. I've seen a little bit of it, but yeah. Plant-based news, by the way, is connected to the World Economic Forum indirectly.
Right.
I have a video on this.
Okay. Well, feel free to play it if you find a spot to put it. What was the first thing on your open tabs list that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I mean, there are many things. Vegans always say that their diet is cruelty-free and then it's that the crop death issue is not an issue, right? Because more crops are grown for animals and that there would be less crops in a vegan world.
Right. That's what they've been reduced. They've and you and I were talking earlier, and they do this when you confront them with this issue, if you confront them with it. But on their daily propaganda that they're putting out there on TikTok and YouTube and all of these social media websites, the message never mentions the so-called crop deaths issue at all. And in fact, they continue to paint veganism as a diet without harm to animals, rather than what they will admit once you corner them, which is, yes, animals are harmed. And they also are, in effect, conceding that crop deaths outnumber animal deaths in animal agriculture, simply because they're falsely trying to attribute all of those crop deaths on animals by making the false claim that most of those crops are grown to feed animals.
Yeah, exactly. And they will only admit certain things when you really press them on certain points. If you mention crop deaths, they will say, "Oh yeah, the combine harvester on occasion kills a rat or some small mice." Right? They talk about harvest deaths, but they will never really talk about actually the bulk of the crop-related killings. And then there's more as you go deeper into that. They say, "Oh, most crops are for animals." Then when you debunk that, then you say, "Oh, but in a vegan world, there would be less, or there would be no demand for animal feed crops, which would lead to less overall crop production," which
Right.
is something I have debunked on my channel, and I can also show additional evidence that this is actually not true.
Yeah. Anyone who's here who isn't subscribed to Anti-War Mindset, go over there today and subscribe and ring the bell, because he's doing some great research over there and has accumulated some links to facts that completely destroy these ongoing claims by vegans along the lines of trying to explain or away their responsibility for crop deaths. And why are they responsible for crop deaths? Because they're trying to take our right to eat meat away based on the harm that it's doing to animals. And we can prove that quadrillions more animals suffer and die every year because of crop agriculture than does in all of animal agriculture every year.
Yeah, and you have to imagine quadrillions is a number that is greater than billions and trillions, and
Right.
the amount of insects that are killed due to pesticides outnumber the stars in our galaxy.
Right. It's a lot. A lot.
But yeah, should I show some stuff that I've
Yeah, pull it up. Give me your next slide here.
Okay, wait a second.
We've got 9 people in the gallery watching us. Thank you for coming. Probably at least one vegan in the crowd.
Okay, you can see that, right?
Yeah. There it
Okay.
is.
Okay, first of all, when we talk about vegan so-called ethics, right? Because vegans, they will always say, or they will paint this picture as if animals in animal agriculture are tortured to death and they're living this miserable existence. Meanwhile, even the Humane League, which is an animal rights vegan organization, even they admit that animals must be stunned, unconscious, and insensible to pain before they are slaughtered, right?
Right.
So even the Humane League admits that animals in animal agriculture are dying painlessly. Okay, that is very interesting, isn't it?
It is. That's a good example of an issue that a vegan would never consider. And I think that the fact that you're bringing this up points to your professed, because I think that you would say that you care about animals. You're not in the favor of causing unnecessary suffering to animals. No one that I know of who is kind of got their head on straight wants the animals to suffer more, you know.
Yeah. And
So if a vegan really cared, then they would already realize that, say, the animals that are killed for animal agriculture, the livestock that are killed, it's done as painlessly as possible. Yet the animals like the wild bunny rabbits that are being shot because they're out there trying to eat the spinach that's now growing in the wild meadow that they used to eat from before it was plowed up and bulldozed. Now they're out there being killed, and it's done in a way that causes tremendous pain and suffering, especially in the case of something like rodenticides, where a cute little field mouse or a cute little bunny rabbit ingests it, and it's an anticoagulant, and it causes the animal to slowly bleed to death internally.
yeah,
And that might take 14 days of agony for this animal, one of trillions every year, just that one species. Trillions every year that die this long, horrific, major suffering, death, no effort to prevent the poison from creeping out of that. There's secondary poisonings that happen. An owl might fly by and see a field mouse that died from one of these poisons after 14, or maybe that field mouse is only 1 week into dying and it's laying there flopping around in the field. That catches the eye of the owl. The owl swoops down, gobbles up this poisoned mouse, and now the owl flies off and now it dies. So there's a cascade effect to the death and suffering. It's like a kaleidoscope of horror that's associated with the crop agriculture, the industrial factory crop agriculture that produces the items on the vegan menu.
Right.
Go ahead.
And right. And from, I mean, just look how ridiculous the vegans paint this picture of, oh, animals are being tortured to death in animal agriculture. This wouldn't make any sense from a business perspective because, first of all, most Western countries that I know have regulations against this, right? And they would risk getting into legal trouble if they were if it was found out that these factory farms are these sadistic horror
Right.
facilities, right? They would get into massive legal trouble, and what would also be bad from an economic perspective because these farm animals, they would damage equipment, they would fight back, they would try to escape, they would try to harm the humans, the slaughtermen. It would take too much time and would be inefficient, right? If it would be done in a torture like way, like the vegans portray it. So it
Yeah.
makes more sense that their death is painless and quick, right? So absolutely ridiculous. And like you described in crop agriculture, the crop protection doesn't care about whether or not the animal is killed humanely. They just shoot the animal with, for example, I have on my channel footage that shows that wild hogs are being killed with miniguns.
With
Right.
little automatic rifles.
Yeah.
Right. They just shoot. You don't. It's not like a semi-automatic rifle that shoots one bullet every time you pull the trigger. Pew, 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 where it shoots like 20. When you pull the trigger, all 20 bullets come out right after the other really quick. And they're just mowing down these pigs that are out there. Why? Because they're out there infringing on the crops. But remember, the crops first infringed on the wild pastures and the wild meadows. And it was the crop agriculture that violated, if there were any rights violations, it was crop agriculture that drew first blood. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. And I also want to address something else, right? Because a vegan will always say, oh, but there are billions of animals being bred into existence to then be slaughtered. And they make it seem like we just created out of nowhere these additional billions of animals. But there's actually data that shows that during the late Pleistocene, there have been similar herbivore densities than today, right? So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's actually not unnatural to have these billions amounts of large ruminant animals roaming around, right? This is well within the natural equilibrium. And
Right.
so these animals would probably exist in similar numbers, even if we humans wouldn't have animal agriculture. Because during
Have
the
you
last,
seen?
Hmm?
Sorry. Have you seen the data that I had pulled up on this? I couldn't get it from one study like this. It came from, I actually was doing the study, and so I was pulling from all of these different sources. showing different estimated populations of pre-European settlement of the North American continent, which are within the border of what's the continental United States. And before it was settled, when it was wild, so to speak, there were 160 million ruminant animals on that property, which is the continental United States. That would include the bison, the moose, the deer, the elk, the sheep, the goats, everything. About 160 million. Today, that's about 110 million. And so we've actually got substantially fewer ruminants on that same continental United States as existed, say, 300 years ago.
Right. So it just shows you this common vegan argument, oh, we're breeding all these animals into existence. It's nonsense. The animals breed themselves into existence, right? So another nonsensical argument basically from the vegans. But also a vegan might be saying that insects that are killed in agriculture, in crop agriculture, do not feel pain. But there are multiple review papers and scientific evidence to the contrary, right? So here is a scientific review that found strong evidence for pain experiences in, for example, flies and mosquitoes, cockroaches and termites, but also substantial evidence in bees, wasps, ants, and sawflies, crickets and grasshoppers. So there's strong evidence for the existence of pain in multiple insect species. Okay. And we have to, again, keep in mind that, for example, some estimates posit that the number that are killed by human beings, the insect numbers that are killed by human beings, could be as large as 10 quadrillion annually. Okay. And most of these killings are due to pesticides. Right?
Right.
And we also can look at this. There is a landmark study by Dr. Sanchez Bayo and colleagues that looked at the drivers of the insect declines worldwide, the extinctions, right? And the biggest drivers are intensive agriculture and pesticides. And intensive agriculture means monocropping when you read into the study. And then we have to figure out, okay, who contributes more to pesticides? Is it the vegans or is it the non-vegans? And given that plant-based food has 5 times the pesticide footprint than animal-based food, and vegans consume more plant-based foods, yeah, it is the vegans that contribute more to pesticides.
So, let me repeat what you just said, which was that a plant-based diet has 5 times the pesticide footprint. Not a plant-based diet, but plant foods. Plant foods have 5 times higher a pesticide footprint than does animal-based foods, correct?
Yes. And those 11% that you see here, that is the pesticide footprint of animals, right? The global pesticide footprint. And in those 11%, we have the animal feed crops like grain and soybean cakes and stuff like that.
So the grains and the feed crops that a vegan would point to and say, that's impossible because most crops are grown for animal consumption, which is not true, but they say it. This would be this would prove that to be absolutely false, correct?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And when you read the study, I think the highest pesticide footprint among the plant foods was, I think, orchard fruits. So, yeah, especially fruits seem to have a high pesticide footprint, and vegans consume a lot of fruits. And yeah, like you just said, one of the reasons why animal foods are actually low in pesticide footprints is because most of what animals eat is actually grass, right? And we don't
Right.
spray gra- uh, the pesticides on
Grass
the.
and leaves. Grass and
Yeah,
leaves. Correct. Yeah.
yeah,
I've got um, goats more than cows. I've transitioned into goats here, and they forage more than they graze. So they eat mostly leaves of different plants, including some juniper, which is considered a problem around here. But these goats are eating their diet. Probably 25 to 30% of their diet is something that's growing out there, wants to grow out there. It doesn't require that I plow up the ground and plant it, cut it up, and then feed it to the animal. It's already growing out of the ground. It's going to grow out of the ground after I'm gone. And it's a major food source for the livestock that I've chosen to place on the property. And no matter which property you've got some type of animal that can naturally forage and thrive on the diet that property uh, can provide, with the exception of an outright desert. Of course, you're not going to, um, without a whole lot more measures. But anyway, yeah, the majority, and this is a global. This graph that you're showing here is a global. These are global numbers when it
yeah,
comes to animal agriculture.
right. And vegan will always say, "Oh, but what about the human edible stuff?" Right? Especially the grains. They will say that a cow or a pig or a chicken eats more grains than a human being, right? But
Right,
this is this is not relevant because this makes because the even accounting for that, there would still be an increase
right.
in many other crops in a vegan world.
That's that. This graph, this graphic that you're showing, which shows that light green color up at the top being the majority of the food, that if you just lump all livestock into one category and look at it from a far away perspective as one big group, then the poultry industry that you mentioned might be grain heavy. Those numbers are already worked into this.
Yeah,
So there's really not, the point that they are trying to make has already been made in their favor, and they're still in a losing position by far. So just trying to bring it up again doesn't mean that it counts twice. It just means that the vegan has run out of ideas to justify a cult whose diet is harming people.
exactly. And people like Joey Armstrong who say that all crops or the vast majority of crops are grown for the animals we eat. They cannot explain a graph like this, for example, which shows that human food crops are double the amounts of hectares than animal feed crops, right? So this already disproves that. Uh, but yeah, let's get into the
Mhm.
evidence that in a vegan world there would be an increase in crop agriculture because this is also important not just for crop deaths but also sustainability issues.
Exactly.
Because a vegan world is actually not sustainable at all. Um, and
It's a
I
very
have
short
even,
road.
yeah,
It's a
it's
very
short.
short. It's a short street. It's a short dead end street.
Yeah, and I have even some data on greenhouse gas emissions, which is also surprising. But yeah, before we have before we're talking about these environmental footprints of a vegan world, we have to talk about nutrition, because a lot of these environmental studies that vegans cite are not factoring in nutrition, and they're just factoring in weight
Calories.
or
Yeah.
calories.
Yeah.
Yeah, or sometimes crude protein, but not adjusted for digestibility, utilizability, etc. Right? And there's almost no study that actually looks at all the nutrients that vegans are missing. So, so yeah, there are at least 20 nutrients that vegans and vegetarians are missing or lacking. This is a great article that goes into that, and here's also from Dr. Peter Ballested's Substack this great post about how many organizations and authorities, health authorities, are actually pushing back against the vegan diet, right? So you got the European Society for Pediatric Gastroenterology, Nutrition, and it states that vegan diets have generally been discouraged during complementary feeding because the risks of failing to follow advice are severe, including irreversible cognitive damage from vitamin B12 deficiency and death. You got other organizations like the German Nutrition Society, which does not recommend a vegan diet for pregnant women. Also, the Swiss Federal Commission for Nutrition. This recommends a vegan diet for pregnant and lactating women.
Yeah.
The Belgian Royal Academy of Medicine claims that a vegan diet comes with bioethical problems and is not suitable for pregnant and lactating women, infants, children, adolescents, and therefore cannot be recommended.
Yeah.
etc.
It can not only cause a miscarriage, it can also cause birth defects that affect the the offspring for all of its life. I mean, if it even survives the malfunction. But for instance, we know that B12 and folate deficiencies are associated with spina bifida, which can be like a baby with water, what they call water on the brain, or there might be some type of water, basically an incomplete area anywhere on the spine, like down on near the sacrum, where the spine does not finish developing, and the child is going to be crippled for all of their life because that causes nerve damage or nerves that never do finish. So having these nutritional deficiencies that vegans are more than happy to risk you having could lead to the birth of a child that dies very soon after birth, or is miscarried, or survives and lives a long and painful, suffering filled life. But vegans do not care about humans, and that's the problem with that argument.
Yeah, meanwhile, they're posing as ethically and morally superior. Meanwhile, their diet sends children to the hospital or the graveyard.
Right.
And I mean, they're not even pausing for a second and say to themselves, wait a minute, this is actually ethically correct.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, anyway, there are a lot of health bodies around the world, especially from Europe, that are discouraging the vegan diet, especially for children and elderly people and pregnant women.
Yeah.
Uh, even, for example, the Belgian Superior Health Council not just for warned for a risk of nutrient deficiencies, but also that this diet is associated with exposure to heavy metals, pesticides, mycotoxins,
Hmm.
arsenic, So this is so those vegans that always say, "Oh, we have this Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics on our side." Well, we have also a lot of health authorities on our side, right? No, I know
Right.
it's an argument from authority, right? But vegans always make arguments from authority. So I just want to say that we also have authorities on our side, you know?
Yeah, and I would to add to what you just said. Um, I'm always, even if I get a list like this, I will check to see if there's any industry authority within the group. Whether there's some type of conflict of interest with some type of corporate partnership or partnerships that may exist. But I would put this list up without even looking at it, just looking at their positions, and I would put the compare anyone on this list to something like the American Dietetic Association, which has basically retracted, for lack of a better word, their former previous position on vegan diets being appropriate at any stage of a human life. They don't back that up anymore. But vegans are still out there parroting that lie. And if you look at the corporate funding of that organization, it's Coca-Cola, Kraft, General Mills, Pfizer, grain, sugar, and drug companies.
Yeah, and Nestle,
And Nestle, yes.
which is partners with the Eat Forum.
Right. Right. So we're coming out with propaganda telling us that things like Fruity Pebbles, some type of sugar coated grain cereal, as long as it's eaten with soy milk instead of real dairy, is healthier than grass fed steak.
Yeah, it's
That's
ridiculous.
it is. It is. So that's. Do you have the links to these so that we can put these in the descriptions of these
Yeah,
videos?
yeah, I will put up the links in a private chat after this
Okay.
presentation here. But yeah, back to the crop issue, right? The reason why I'm sort of prefacing this with going into nutrition is because when we say we swap the different food groups, we have to see whether or not we can actually feed human beings like that, and how much nutritional loss we would actually have to compensate for, right? And now this study here, I've shown this the last time. It's a narrative review looking at plant-based dietary scenarios, and it comes to the conclusion that complete replacement of plant-based proteins with animal proteins with plant-based proteins would um, result in a deficit or a reduced amino acid adequacy. Okay, especially for, again, vulnerable groups are especially affected by this. And
Wait, hold on. Don't move too fast by that. Are you going to move on? I
okay,
just want to. So this study that you've got up here is confirming the fact that plant-based dietary protein scenarios are inadequate compared to animal-based dietary protein scenarios have not been deemed inadequate.
yeah,
Is that basically what this study shows?
yeah, exactly. They say here that protein adequacy from some plant source foods were not met for simulated diets of children and older adults, Reduced amino acid adequacy was observed with increasing intake of plant foods in some scenarios. So now the thing is that, for example, soy seems to be the best plant protein source. So
Mhm.
given that this would probably the most likely candidate of our protein source in a vegan world. So we would actually be increasing soy production because of that, which is unsustainable.
Right. And in addition to soy production, there would have to be an increase in soy processing. And the processing is industrial processing. We're talking about something that from a distance you see it as this huge, ugly factory that's got all these smokestacks and black smoke coming away from it. That's what this means. As far as the increase in the deforestation because of a required increase of soybean cultivation in a vegan world, and then that meal that's left over is oftentimes toxic and it's contaminated with neurotoxins such as hexane, and uh, I'm sure that in some grades of soybean meal that hexane is too high for human consumption. So that would have to be dealt with, and then also just separating the protein from the cellulose, because none of that cellulose will be, you don't normally buy, if you buy soy protein, you don't normally get the cellulose with it. You're just getting the protein isolate, and the cellulose has been removed. And so right now, that protein, that soy meal and soy cake that's being fed to pigs and poultry and salmon, um, it doesn't have to be processed any further. They can extract that protein from the meal. They don't have to process it into soybean protein isolate, but for human consumption, they would have to do that. So imagine who knows how many factories they would have to build, and these factories are going to be petroleum dependent. They're going to have methane emissions. They're going to have a carbon footprint that is out of this world. So all of these issues have to be fleshed out um, in order to counter the lies and the childish fantasies that veganism is constantly giving to the world.
Yeah, exactly what you just mentioned. A lot of these things are not factored into any of these environmental studies that look at different diets and say that, oh, the plant-based diet has the least environmental footprint compared to a meat-heavy diet or anything like that. Also, things like supplement manufacturing, which would increase in a vegan world, has also a tremendous environmental footprint, and that is also never factored into these kinds of
Correct.
studies.
Correct.
And even the study here just states more environmental resources and higher intake of plant foods are required to attain the same nutritional outputs, e.g., meeting total indispensable amino acid requirements as animal foods. Okay, so more plants in order to compensate for the lack of animal foods. And that's just looking at protein. It's not even looking at all the other nutrients. Okay.
Right.
Now, the next study that I want to show is the use of the Delta model to understand the food system and global nutrition. Now, here is the methods. What is the Delta model? The Delta model was constructed using global food commodity balance sheet data, usually from the FAO, alongside demographic and nutrient requirement data from the UN and European Food Safety Authority sources. It also includes nutrient bioavailability considerations for protein, the indispensable amino acids, iron, zinc, sourced from scientific literature. Okay, so it basically looks at what would happen nutritionally under different food scenarios. And here are some results. So they have baseline, right, for 2018. Then they have a
Mhm.
scale up of that baseline. So what would happen if the global population increases just using that baseline diet pretty much. And then they have a no meat scenario, which is basically vegetarian. It's not even vegan. So this is of interest here.
Mhm.
And the no meat scenario has at least 19 to 20% global food supply increase compared to the scale up baseline scenario. But they still have nutrient gaps for example, calcium, iron, vitamin B12. So they have,
Mhm.
and also nutrient excesses of carbohydrate,
Carbohydrates.
right?
Right.
So they say here the no meat scenario set all meat and seafood production to zero, whereas all remaining food groups were increased by 20% to achieve a similar total biomass production to the scale up scenario. So all remaining food groups would be increased in a no meat scenario. Now this would
Tell
also
me, if you know if they factored in protein adequacy, and there was another question I had too. But what do you know if they covered protein adequacy when they're
yeah,
saying to make up the difference?
yes.
Okay, did they factor that in?
As far as I understand, yes.
Okay.
And of course, all other food groups also means stuff like dairy, but it also means crops, right? And this is just a no meat scenario. So imagine if this was a 100% vegan scenario, right? So, and the no meat scenario already has nutritional gaps. So, if that is the case for the no meat scenario, then we would see definitely an increase in crops in a vegan scenario, right?
An increase in crops in a vegan scenario, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And here's also another study, examination of the interrelationships between nutrition, environmental sustainability, and food processing. And it basically looks at the environmental footprints of different meal plans, right? So they have healthy meal plan, unhealthy, healthy plant-based,
Hmm.
processed, and healthy plant-based. Now they classify healthy and unhealthy along with some health index, right, where they
Mhm.
rate plant foods as healthier,
Yeah,
which is nonsense. But
bullshit. Yeah.
so here's an example, right, of this type of meal plan. So for example, unhealthy would be white toast with butter, eggs, sausages, stuff like that. So basically, when you go through this list, it's the standard American diet more or less in the unhealthy meal plan, and then the healthy is a little bit of animal products, but it's mostly grains and stuff like that. And
It's like the standard American diet. It's gonna be about 70% plant-based.
right. And when we look at the crop land use for these different diets, because they did factor in nutrition as it seems, or they factor that in to some extent at least, the macros and some of the micros. Um, but yeah, when we look at the cropland use, right, the both the plant-based diets have a higher cropland use than the standard American diets, right, with
Right.
the animal foods in it. Okay, so this is very important to also have this differentiation between cropland and land in general, because we can agree that land use in general might decrease in a vegan world, because the pasture land would not be used by animal agriculture anymore, because it can only be used by animal agriculture and not for crops. So that land would be unused, right? Which is most of the agricultural land. It's marginal land. But the
It's
crop,
marginal. It's non-arable. It won't grow crops.
right,
It just won't do it.
right. But the cropland, that would increase in a vegan
Right.
world.
Right.
And that is relevant for crop deaths, because crop deaths are mostly because of cropland. Here's also another study, telecoupled environmental impacts of current and alternative Western diets. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, if we were to flesh those numbers out, I guarantee you that there aren't enough arable acres on the planet to serve a vegan world.
Right. And this study is actually sort of going into this, more or less, indirectly. So what telecoupled means is that, for example, if the United States was 100% vegan, what kind of impact would this change have in other areas in the world, in other countries, from a environmental perspective, for example? Because there would be a shift in supply chains, there would be a shift in imports, exports, etc., right? So here's a spreadsheet that sort of looks at the methodology. So declared diets means what are vegans eating right now, right? So it's not some made up vegan version of the vegan diet, but what it is collected from survey data, food frequency questionnaires, right? And it's harmonized, and it's then looked at what would be the demand for the items of that diet per gram of capita per year, and then what kind of impact this would have on bilateral trade, and factor in crop yield data, and then looking at the demand for feed crops and all kinds of crop specific changes, okay, in a crop footprint per quarter meter per capita per year, okay? And here are the results of that. And so they call it outsourced land footprint.
Square meter?
Yes, square meter, right? Not quarter meter, square meter per capita per year. And what is good is that they differentiate between different lands, right? So here's the baseline, the average American diet, and it has, for example, cropland for food. The footprint is 163, and cropland for feed is 20
26.
square meter per capita per year outsourced land footprint. So if we add these two things up, it's 189. Okay. However, if we look at the vegan outsourced land footprint square meter per capita per year, it is 304.
Wow.
And I did the math on the percentage increase on that, and it's 60% higher. Okay, 60% higher.
Wow.
So the
What do you think?
outsourced.
What do you think Joey Carbstrong would say to this? Because this flies in the face of everything that he says about crop deaths not mattering, because most of the cropland goes to feed the animals. This shows that to be a lie.
Yeah.
which means, in other words, the vegan scenario, because of the cropland required, goes from 163, which is what we would have today, to 304. Yeah, you've dropped that 26 down to 1, but you raised the 163 to a 304.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the only sort of counter argument the vegans sort of would make is probably that they would say, oh, the grassland is reduced also, land footprint, but grasslands, they don't use many pesticides or barely any pesticides actually. What you might say is the cow steps on an occasional insect on those
Yeah,
grasslands, but this
right.
is not bringing down the insect population, right? So it's
Right.
maybe, I don't know, 1,000 deaths per year or so, but not quadrillions.
Yeah,
So
and not to mention the fact that if managed properly, that grazing of the grassland is going to be sequestering carbon into the soil, which makes it more permeable to water. It can hold more water. It can support more vegetation. It can support more life. And yes, there are those vegans out there like Nutrivore that have gone over the line, and they're actually endorsing that we begin to nuke parts of the planet to kill all the animals, destroy the ecosystem, so that there is no life out there. Therefore there can be no suffering, no life, no suffering. So get rid of the life. But in the case of a herd of ruminants out there on the prairie, um, grazing, like you said, they might step on an insect from time to time. Yes, that is a process that has been going on forever. So it is if you want to count those animal deaths, fine, but that's really it's not something that there's been a net gain of. There's not more insects being stepped on by ruminants. There's less ruminants today than there was before the Industrial Revolution. And so uh, that can be brought up, and I know the issue that you're facing with that information, but just to the vegans out there, that's not a valid point for veganism.
right, and I also want to say something about the Nutrivore, because his argument against me was like, okay, there would be predation on, let's say, grassland or in wild uh, animal habitat, but the problem with that is that we're talking about humans killing animals. We're not talking about animals killing other animals. So this is a different conversation. This is basically a non sequitur,
Right.
and there's a moral and logical and even legal difference between uh, killing and sort of preventing a future death, for example, right? Just from a logical point of view. Uh,
Right. We'll give you an example. They want to count that. They'll bring that up as an issue. It's not an issue for all the reasons we just listed, but at the same time, they won't they won't address the pesticides, for instance, the insects that are dying just from the agricultural pesticides is in the quadrillions every year. So when they're ignoring that and they're focusing on a cow that might step on a grasshopper out in the field, now they're being that ridiculous, like they are whenever you start pointing out the crop deaths issue. They say, hey, no one can live a completely harm-free life. Even if you order something on Amazon, there might be a FedEx jet flying through the air carrying your package, and along the way it hits a bird and that bird dies. Well, that bird dies because of you. You ordered that product that ended up having to be shipped over here, requiring an air flight, and therefore but we all kill, just by living. We understand there's going to be some reasonable level of animal suffering and death as a result of our existence, but have you looked at the definition of veganism lately? It's as much as practicable. So we're doing that. We're meeting the practicable definition. But again, they're ignoring quadrillions, and they're pointing to something that is really infinitesimally small when you're talking about the insects that a cow might step on grazing out in the field. It's not going to be a large number.
Yeah, I mean, I've shown I've shown the drivers of insects decline worldwide, and nowhere does it say here cows stepping on insects, right? It says stuff like intensive agriculture and pesticides and urbanization and fertilizers and deforestation and pollutants. It doesn't say cows stepping on insects. It doesn't even say natural predation.
Right.
So yeah, that's that, I guess. And also, again, this other study, 10 diet scenario study that I've also shown. So what is good about this graph here is that it shows that even if we account for animal feed crops, there would still be a net increase in crop agriculture. So in the diet scenarios, we have the baseline here, right? And we can just ignore the green colors here, the green bars, because those are pastures and perennial croplands, which is not really sprayed with pesticides, right?
Right.
And if we ignore those green bars, then we see in vegan scenario, compare that to the baseline, and it's roughly 20% increase in a vegan scenario. And again, it factors in feed grains and soy, oil seeds, right? So
Right.
those would be reduced in a vegan scenario, but overall crop production would still be increasing. Okay, so sorry, sorry, Joey Capstrong, but you're wrong. Okay, and last but not least, I think this is actually also a very important study because it also factors in greenhouse gas emissions, or yeah, it's 40 to 60 optimal ratio between animal and plant-based proteins for health and environment. And says right here, diets containing less than 18 grams of animal source protein per capita per day show nutrient
Inadequacies.
inadequacies, leading to increases in both land use and greenhouse gas emissions. And they say here, nutrient inadequacies and increased land use and greenhouse gas emissions in fully plant-based diets. Nutrient inadequacy emerged consistently below a daily intake of 18 grams of animal source proteins per capita per day. Decreasing animal source proteins further not only led to increased nutrient inadequacy, but also to increased land use and greenhouse gas emissions. This is due to an increased demand for crops high in certain nutrients, for example, calcium, such as legumes, vegetables, nuts, and seeds and fruits, to compensate for the absence of animal sourced nutrients. The increased use of artificial fertilizers required for these crops and transportation of foods also results in higher greenhouse gas emissions. The main
Wow.
nutrients leading to inadequacies were vitamin B12, EPA, and DHA, inadequately supplied below 18 grams of animal source protein per capita, and day, as well as calcium, selenium, vitamin B3, and energy. So this basically just
You
confirms.
just destroyed Joy Carbstrong. You just killed him. Everything that he says can be debunked with this one paragraph.
Yeah, it basically confirms everything that we have been saying, and they say exactly what we have been saying, that the nutrient inadequacies leads to higher demand in crops, which leads to these environmental footprints.
Right. That's why they always go for the calories. They talk about human nutrition as if all we require is calories.
Yeah, but calories are not relevant for human nutrition. We cannot
No.
live on calories. You can have two diets. One has 1,000 calories, and the other one also has 1,000 calories, but the one has more protein, more B12, more DHA, and the other one has less of that, but has more sugar,
Right.
more carbohydrates, and stuff like
Both
that.
with the exact amount of the exact same amount of calories, but two hugely different nutritional scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. So looking at nutrition actually confirms that a plant-based diet is not ideal for the environment
Right.
and the animals.
So this is the first study that I've seen that actually covers what I've been trying to get people to realize, even in the anti-vegan population. These anti-vegans don't even have their head wrapped around the fact that not only would a vegan mandate cause protein deficiencies, but all of these other deficiencies that the emissions on creating synthetic versions of all of these, and synthetic vitamins are never bio identical to the real thing, so they do not work exactly the same, and you need it to be old school bio identical B12 or whatever it is that you are supplementing. Your biology really does require the real thing, not some synthetic thing. And then, like we're pointing out here again, is that the emissions that come along, all of the production of these synthetic below par nutrients that they can make in these huge factories that billow black smoke and burn all types of fossil fuels like coal, and have gargantuan methane emissions. All of these supplements that are required to be delivered in plastic bottles to vegans in a vegan world, all of those emissions have not been factored into any of the studies that the vegans are constantly throwing up. It's these studies right here that we're looking at today that show all of that to be lies.
Yeah, and this study is actually, I think they said that they're not even looking at protein quality. So they're not even factoring in all the nutrition that
Right.
actually, so they're even underestimating the harm done by plant-based diets.
Right. The protein inadequacy of the plant-based scenario has not been factored in. So this is a very light-handed knockout punch.
Yeah, exactly. If there's really a 100% honest study that looks at a full life cycle analysis of a vegan diet scenario with all the different like food miles factored in and the nutritional compensation that would have to be done, and the pesticide footprint, and also the emissions from the pesticides, and also the emissions from the supplement industry, etc. I think that the vegan diet would be one of the worst diets for the environment ever.
Absolutely. No doubt.
And speaking of emissions, so here's a report from Minnesota that looks at greenhouse gas emissions, for example, of agriculture. And as you can see here, crop agriculture actually has higher emissions than animal agriculture. And this is EPA data. And I think the EPA also finds a similar picture for the whole of the United States, not just for Minnesota. Okay. So this is additional evidence that crop agriculture is actually a worse offender than the animal agriculture in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And this is the United States we're talking about, so probably the highest meat or beef consumption of the world, right?
Hmm.
And what you mentioned about supplements, here's TerraSeed. They have a report that looks at the supplement industry and how it kills billions of animals and how it is creating plastic waste, plastic bottles, billions plastic bottles. It's very unsustainable. Okay. So a vegan might be saying, oh, but TerraSeed itself is a vegan supplement company. So they would probably then counter this with that and say, oh, we should then all buy from TerraSeed or from similar companies like that, right?
Yeah.
However, I did find something out very interesting about TerraSeed, which is actually really the most sustainable vegan supplement company that I could find. And even they actually contribute to animal suffering. Okay. So, for example, TerraSeed's omega-3 is sustainably sourced from microalgae grown indoors, and it's made in a facility that is 100% powered by wind energy. So the omega-3 supplement or the omega-3 ingredient of the multivitamin supplement is sourced from microalgae grown indoors, and this facility is powered by wind energy. Now, wind energy kills millions of birds and bats in a year
Yeah.
and trillions of insects. Okay. So even the most sustainable company, supplement company, vegan supplement company that I could find on the market, even they are basically also contributing to animal suffering.
Hmm.
And also, wind energy is actually not scalable. So we cannot actually have a system where we source our omega-3 from indoor facilities powered by wind energy. This is not possible.
I don't know. Have you ever seen one of these big wind turbines up close and in person? Have you ever seen one?
Not that close. I've been driving around and have seen them from afar.
These things are like some of the tallest buildings. They're tall. They're skyscrapers tall. These things are huge. And what you just went over was the amount of birds and insects that these blades that are spinning around in the air are are humongous blades, and they're slapping insects and birds out of the air. Imagine, well, we know that insects and birds migrate. So imagine a big flock of migrating swans flies by and happens to pass through one of these wind farms. Well, there's a pretty good chance that they're all going to be knocked out and killed before they make it through. And yes, that happens also to the insects, the grasshoppers and the butterflies. And then the vegan says, well, we don't care about insects. And you say, well, what about honey? And they'll say, well, except for that, those bees deserve to be able to make that honey without you. They'll go straight into that spiel about how it's wrong to eat honey, but those insects that are being slapped out of the sky by those gigantic wind turbines is just an acceptable collateral damage. And just one layer of hypocrisy on top of another layer of hypocrisy. I mean, it's just the strata is in the thousands as far as the layers of hypocrisy that you get from a seasoned vegan activist. Go
Right.
ahead.
Yeah, their position on honey doesn't make any sense, especially coming from someone like Earthling Ed, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And but yeah, again, what I wanted to say about supplements is that it is well known that most supplements are made from petroleum and coal tar, and so that's not really sustainable, that's not really environmentally friendly. And even again, the most sustainable and environmentally friendly supplement producer that I could find, even they have something like wind powered facilities where they source their omega 3 from. Okay. Very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it shows me that this idea that in a vegan world we can just get these supplements, where vegans claim that this is sustainable. No, actually, it is not. And it's not just B12 that is missing, right? Hello?
No, you're right. I mean, there's B12. There's I mean, there's no heme iron at all in the vegan diet. And then you've got a list of nutrients that are on the list that's titled conditionally essential. So something like creatine is not considered essential only because we can make a little bit of it. And it's ridiculous because they went ahead and called it non-essential before they checked to see if we always produce enough of it if we don't get it in the diet. And the answer is no, we don't. So it's a conditionally essential nutrient that there are going to be times throughout a human being's life, multiple times, maybe on the monthly, we don't know, where the creatine that you can make in-house in your own biology is insufficient, and you need a dietary source of creatine in the diet. And so there's essential nutrients, there's conditionally essential nutrients. And the true scenario, when you begin to understand how deficient the vegan diet really is and what the scale of industrial manufacture, factories emitting huge billowing black smoke, the number of those big environmental messes that would be required to produce all of the missing nutrients and missing essential nutrients and conditionally essential nutrients in the vegan diet is it's flabbergasting when you get your mind wrapped around what it would take. And it's an issue that vegans do not bring up, and they'll try every trick in the book to avoid talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I mean, there are some vegans on YouTube that just show what kind of supplements they are taking throughout the day, and they have like some of these vegans have huge amounts of supplements that they are taking, at least 8 supplements or so throughout the day. I think Fully Raw Christina showed the amount of supplements that she's taking, and it's a huge amount. So, and again, it results in huge environmental impacts because the manufacturing of that supplement is not just made in a lab. It's not just some innocent thing. It's the same with lab grown meat. It's also not just made in a lab. It's actually made in factories.
Yeah, with all types of, I mean, if they ever get a factory up and running, because just the labs right now that are trying to do it, uh, the uh, the amounts of supplemental substances that they have to have circulating into this, and all types of hosing and pipes and different barrels of this and barrels of that, and it's got layers and layers and layers and layers of industrial manufacture of all of these different chemicals. It's going to have a footprint that is beyond. It's the footprint of that lab grown meat is going to be so huge that it will they'll have a hard time. I don't think that they'll ever disclose how big that footprint really is. They'll try to keep that on the down low. I think they're already avoiding that conversation.
Yeah, for lab grown meat, they have a study that showed that a life cycle analysis revealed that it was something for greenhouse gas emissions in comparison to beef. It was 4 to 25 times higher for lab grown meat.
4 to 25 times higher
Yes.
for lab grown meat than just regular meat.
Yes.
Yeah. It's odd that that information can be published, but the big machine just keeps rolling on and making claims as if that type of study had never been done. It's just like the chat AI bots, they'll make that same kind of claim that, oh yeah, lab grown meat has a smaller footprint than greenhouse emission footprint than a regular grass fed beef. They'll make that claim, and then when you try to get them to back it up with sources, that claim actually can't be made using the sources that they provide. And on the contrary, in fact, there are studies like the one that you just mentioned that prove just the opposite is true.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that those types of meats are produced in factories using huge bioreactors, right? All of this requires
Yeah.
huge amounts of electricity, heating, methane emissions. So this is not just done in a lab. But yeah,
Yeah. The picture they try to paint is there's a handsome scientist in a long white lab coat with the movie star hairdo pouring one beaker of some type of benign fluid into another beaker and twirling it around a little bit, raising it up to the light and going, got it. We got 500,000 servings of B12 right here. It's nothing like that. It's all, like you said, coal tar, coke, coal, oil, methane, you name it, there's a fossil fuel involved.
I even saw sulfur mining. I think it was for the creatine or for the taurine supplements that was involved in there. But yeah, I'll probably make an extra video on supplements. This is definitely what I'm gonna do. But yeah, let's also talk about soybeans, right? Because people like Jeffrey Phillips and Chris Hines, and people like that, they have been laughing about the soybeans, right?
Yeah.
Issue, right? They say, oh,
Trivializing it,
yeah, they say that
blaming
soybean
it
oil,
on livestock.
yeah, they say that the soybean oil is actually the byproduct of the meal and things like that. But
Yeah, they're
eco-
saying that if we could get rid of the livestock industry, get rid of all animal agriculture, then we wouldn't have to grow most of the soy. Only about 20% of the soy would we be growing, because they're not being honest. They're telling people a half truth. They're talking about a by weight measurement. They're not explaining that 100% or close to 100% of the soybeans are extracted or the processed to extract the oil. And the oil is 100% consumed by humans, either as food or as biodiesel primarily.
yeah, and now I just have a question for the audience. Would you rather believe random vegans on YouTube making claims about soybeans and what drives the soybean market and what is the economic driver of the soybean market? Or would you rather believe someone like Eric Norland, who's the executive director and senior economist of the CME group? So, an actual economist. And he has different things to say about what actually drives the soybean market. Okay. So, we can look at this graph here, shows the oil price is higher than the meal price over almost 2 decades, okay, per pound in US dollars. This already gives us some good indication. I mean, it's twice the price of soybean meal per pound, okay? Now, it also says in the same report that if soybean oil prices surge, that often pulls the price of soybeans higher as well, although not to the same extent. Nevertheless, higher soybean prices impact planting decisions and have the potential to increase the global output of soybeans in 1 year's time. So, therefore, a higher price for soybean oil can translate into a greater production of soybeans in general, which in turn can boost the supply of both highly valued soybean oil and generally less expensive soybean meal. So, did you catch that? They say a higher price for soybean oil translates into greater production of soybeans in general. And the price of soybean oil is consistently higher than the price of soybean meal, which means that it is the oil that drives the growth of the soybean market. Okay. It also says here soybean oil has a stronger influence on planting decisions than less valuable soybean meal. And with the planting decisions, they mean whether or not the farmer plants these beans. Okay.
I'll add to this the fact that there's examples of efforts that are going on to breed or genetically engineer a soybean that produces more oil, because the oil is so much more valuable than the rest of the bean. You don't find efforts to increase the amount of soybean meal in each soybean. That uh, anyone, if any soybean farmer out there, if he could get a soybean with 90% oil in it by weight, they'd all be all over that, because the oil is where the big money is.
Yeah,
That's where the high profit margins are.
right. And they also explain in this report that for example in China, as the society in China gets wealthier, they consume more soybean oil, more vegetable oil. So this is also a growth factor. It's economic growth. The soybean oil seems to be tied to the price of crude oil, but also to the economic growth of China, because China imports a lot of soy from Brazil. And as China gets wealthier, which it seems to be doing, then they import more soy for the oil. Okay. So with that said, I mean the people that laughed at you, like Jeffrey Phillips, we have proven that the soybean market is driven by the oil, pretty much.
Yeah, and that is really just it's a minor crop if you're talking about global crops, and as far as right now, um, as far as I think you had pulled up a study showing the pesticide, talking about the pesticide footprint, that the crops that have the highest pesticide footprint are not associated with animal agriculture at all.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah. It's plant-based foods, and again, the animal-based foods that they have here listed as 11%. They mean those footprints mainly come from grains and oil seed cakes, which means soybean oil, soybean meal, I mean. So yeah, it's the vegans have a higher pesticide footprint. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we can also look at other studies that show that pesticide exposure in the diet increases as you increase the
Mm,
plant-based foods.
yep,
Vegans have a higher pesticide footprint, end of story. And those who have a higher pesticide footprint kill more animals, because most animals that we kill are insects, and insects are mainly killed by pesticides. End of
exactly.
end of story. Vegans kill more animals than any other way of eating. It's just
Right.
that there's no
The
way out.
only way out of that for any vegan is in checkmate at that point. The only way out was that failed attempt that Reasonable Vegan. Do you remember Reasonable Vegan? I don't think
Yeah,
he's around much anymore, but what he did with facing that was to say that I don't care about insects. I'm a vegan, but I don't care about insects. And but then when I asked him, "What about honey? Is honey vegan?" and he said, then he gave me the whole thing about, well, you have to think about it. The bees made that honey so that they could have that honey. So taking that honey from those bees harms the bees, and for that reason, no, vegan's not honey is not honey is not vegan.
yeah,
So they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, right? They're in this schizophrenic dichotomy of reality, and both of those different realities are not the same, but they're living in both of them at the same time. It's weird.
yeah, and also uh, insects do actually feel pain. So if you say you value sentience, or ability to feel pain in animals or something like that, then you should also value insects. Then their pain should also matter to you. That's number one. And number two, even if you don't care about that, then should be concerned about insects and whether or not insects go extinct or not, because they are important for literally our survival on this planet, because they hold the ecological system together. If there's no, but most plants on this planet need pollination, it, including crops that humans grow, that vegans consume. So if you
Right.
don't, if you say you don't care about insects, then you don't care about anything actually, right? Because without insects, without
Yes.
insects, without insects, we would die pretty much. There would be no vegetation. There would be no food. There would be,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's where the vegan does this really weak Jedi mind trick at this point, where they say, "Well, I'm concerned about the animals. We can talk about ecology later, but my priority right now is to stop intentionally breeding animals into existence and killing them." I mean, we can all agree that that's wrong, right? You know, so they have this focus, and no matter what you bring into their line of sight, they're going to push it out of the way, and they're going to say, no, no, we have to deal with your menu, the food that you're eating, the animals that are actually dying for the vegan menu. We'll talk about that later. The truth is they don't ever intend on talking about it. It's because veganism is not about the animals. It's not about health. It's about people, and it's about controlling people is what it's
yeah,
really about.
yeah, and for the corporations to make a bigger profit, the vegan industry is much more profitable than the animal industry, which is the actual driving force behind veganism.
Which industry?
The plant foods industry.
Pesticide industry,
That
which is
also,
petroleum.
yeah,
The irony that they're all of these liberal ideas, veganism, vegans being holders of that, they would be the ones out there buying electric vehicles. A vegan buying electric vehicle makes sense. But when you realize that most of the electricity in the world that's produced, that is being burnt in these electric vehicles, is being produced with the burning of some type of fossil fuel to run boilers that produce steam so that electricity can be produced for people who don't want to burn fossil fuels,
yeah. I
right?
mean, yeah, it's. I haven't even thought about that. That's true. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think we have sufficiently proven that vegans do kill more animals. Vegans that a vegan world would require more crops while having greater crop land use, potentially higher greenhouse gas emissions, and also um, undersupply of nutrition and nutritional deficits. Very, very good, amazing vision for the future, vegans.
Yeah. Very amazing. We're just pulling up an Earthling Ed, his latest. Let me see how long it is. All right. This is it's 26 minutes long. I don't think that we have time to watch the whole thing.
Is it
But
fake debate?
yeah, fake debate. Vegan fake debate. Let me pull it up. All right, can you see this guy?
Yeah.
Does that guy look like a meat eater to you, or does he look like a fellow vegan activist who's being paid to pretend and offer lame arguments against veganism.
Well, he could be employed by Beyond Meat or Blue Horizon Ventures.
So what are the chances that this guy's going to bring up the nutritional inadequacies of a vegan diet, and he's just going to say, I eat meat because humans are dominant over the earth, or something like that?
Yeah, he's probably going to make some edgy comment about humans are the superior species and therefore we should be eating meat or something, as a strawman argument.
I agree.
Don't forget to turn up the volume of that video because it's muted right now.
Right. Okay, let's see.
Really, I have kind of decided that.
How's that volume?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I am not interested in extending sympathy or empathy towards the animals which are harmed in the creation of my pleasure, because I don't gain anything by feeling miserable as a result of that.
Everyone.
Does that sound like the argument of a real meat eater with an opinion on diet?
Well, not really. I've never heard any meat eater talk like that, but they're probably going with this debate. They're going for the over intellectual justification for meat eating, sort of pseudo intellectual pretentious might makes right philosophy.
Right. So this guy, to me, looks like an actor. I mean, he doesn't look like an actor. He looks like a bad actor, right? But I just think it's, to me, I can't imagine that people look at these debates and think that these are real legitimate debates. But let's see how this guy comes across.
And I have a banner that says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" You've very kindly waited. You've very kindly sat down. So tell me, why aren't you vegan yet?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Ed.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming out to Providence.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
As far as why I'm not vegan, I've thought about it, and one thing I'll start by reconciling.
Yeah.
I'm objectively in the wrong.
Okay.
I'm not on the right side of history, not on the right side of the animal product industry.
All right. So he's already conceded that anyone that is eating meat is in the wrong, right? He's going to go ahead and concede that.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I watched these fake Earthling Ed debates, they always they never have a strong position against veganism. They always have these like, oh, actually, you're right. We should be vegan, blah blah blah. They never have. I mean, if they're not actors, if they're actual people, then they really have never thought about this even 1 second.
Right. And because they haven't thought about it for 1 second, I don't think they're the type of people that would see him sitting there and challenge him to a debate of sorts about veganism or meat eating. Because someone that hasn't done any research and knows nothing I don't think would have an interest in standing their ground on the issue against Earthling Ed. He apparently knows who Earthling Ed is. He thanked him for coming to the campus. He knows he's a celebrity. So
yeah.
All right.
But I am not here for the industry or anyone else but myself.
Right.
I have a very hedonistic approach to the world and everything.
Yeah.
And I think meat tastes very good. I enjoy consuming animal products. It makes it easier to get the nutrition which I need to get around every day.
He did mention nutrition just now. Makes it easier to get the nutrition.
Yeah, but he immediately said that he said the nutrition that I need. So not
Right.
in general
Right.
that you get better or essential nutrition from animals, but it's a personal thing. It's a personal
Right.
need. Like he's the only
Right.
human being on this planet that needs animal nutrition.
Right. Okay.
And because of that, it's quite easy for me to rationalize eating animal products.
Yeah.
I don't consider animals to be at the same level of sentience as humans.
Sure.
I consider them to be significantly below that. I believe anyone would recognize that. So I don't feel bad in using them as a means to a better quality of life for myself and many other people around the world.
Sure. I mean, I would push back a little bit on the nutrients aspect of it. You can easily get nutrients in a plant-based diet. It's just about knowing where to get them, and once you know where, it's easy. But I'm interested. There seems to be a little contradiction.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you say that you are ethically in the wrong, and you're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
But then you
Yeah, that's not. That's a ridiculous thing to say. And I think if you go back, you'll see that the majority of the people that he's supposedly debating sit down and say something like that. That's just like a part of their brand is for these so-called meat eaters to sit down and go, first of all, Earthling Ed, I'm in the wrong and you're in the right. Okay, let's get that out of the way. But
Yeah.
I really love to eat meat because I'm hedonistic and I'm egotistical and I'm masochistic and I'm all of these things.
Yeah,
So-
and also, I wonder if they will extend the conversation further about nutrition, because Earthling Ed said that he wants to push back on nutrition. Oh, you can easily get all the nutrients from plants, but he hasn't said anything else just yet. Maybe
Right.
maybe they talk about that later, but I assume that they will quickly sidestep that whole conversation about nutrition, because it's absolutely not true that
Right.
you can get everything from plants.
You cannot.
Yeah, and Earthling Ed probably knows this, and he will not admit this.
Right.
take this attitude of saying, well, ethically, animals don't seem to matter as much because as long as you like how they taste, that's all that's really relevant to the conversation. So is there not an inherent contradiction there?
I will say, just because they matter less does not mean they matter at all.
Yeah.
I would say my enjoyment outranks a lot of their needs and desires. And also, the main reason why I say I'm ethically in the wrong,
Yeah.
the meat, animal products, all of them, horrible for the environment.
Yes.
So he's conceded now that animal agriculture, throw a blanket over all of it, it's all horrible for the environment, right?
Yeah, I mean, the crop agriculture is worse for the environment. But yeah, this is sort of mainstream reasoning about animal agriculture, that it's horrible for the environment. So that doesn't matter what kind of animal agriculture we're actually talking about, whether it's regenerative agriculture, whether it's pastoralism or CAFO, animal agriculture. And even with that, when we look at the United States, it has lower greenhouse gas emissions than crop agriculture. So, and they're, yeah, I mean, they're bringing up nutrition and the environment, which is interesting because usually they talk about culture and taste preferences.
Right. So they're covering these issues in a way that makes the meat eater look like a bad person, but someone who's admittedly bad. He's just admitting he's bad.
I believe that is a much bigger issue than the actual suffering or misfortune of the animals.
Yeah.
Because I think the well-being of the world takes a precedent over their individual experience.
But does it take precedent over your taste buds? What's more important, the world or your taste buds?
Obviously the world, but I'm
You say
not.
obviously.
Yes,
But you
but I'm
haven't
not going to
done
be
that.
here for
Right.
the entire world.
Right.
So I don't actually have to consider the scope of the entire universe, the entire world,
No.
and its longevity. I only have to consider the 80 to 100 years I have left. And within that,
So this is also propaganda towards a goal of removing all individuality, so that the greater good is always considered when your right to be living is taken into consideration, because it might actually benefit the group if you weren't around on this earth anymore. And so that's part of the psychology here, is to make here's a guy that's going to the extreme. The extreme of that is, I'm such an individual. I am so detached from the group that I don't even care if we destroy the Earth's ecology and the human race goes extinct. That'll happen long after I'm gone, by my calculations, and therefore I can go ahead and do those things that cause that to be a possibility. But he's misattributing what's actually damaging the Earth's ecology is not livestock agriculture. It's the industrial factory crop agriculture that's producing the items on the vegan menu that's causing the majority of that ecological destruction.
Yeah.
my personal hedonism is massively inflated because that is there for the entirety of my time alive, whereas the world is only here for a small glimmer of that.
Yeah. I mean, 80 to 100 years might be optimistic if you continue to consume animal products. Yeah. But that point aside, are you saying then that obviously poor people in the world were suffering as a result of climate change, and animals were suffering as a result of meat, dairy, and egg consumption?
So now, say again.
Yeah, I want to point two things out. First of all, we wanted to slip in there the assertion that you're gonna live a very short life if you consume animal products, because he said it's going to be optimistic 80 to 100 years if you consume animal products, which is nonsense. And second of all, he said that he's sort of concerned about poor people or something, what he just said, right? And let me remind you that this is Earthling Ed, who is supported by Blue Horizon Ventures. Blue Horizon Ventures has lobbied 50 governments around the world to increase prices on animal foods during a time in which there was food inflation. Okay, so this is how much Earthling Ed cares about poor people, right? And this is how ethical he is. Just want to remind people of that.
He was willing to risk a level of famine in order to increase demand for the products that he's funded by. Is that basically what we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just flabbergasted that none of the vegans actually called Earthling Ed out over this, right? His association with Blue Horizon Ventures, and not just that they're partnered with pesticide companies, pesticides kill animals, but also that he is connected to Blue Horizon, which lobbied to increase prices on food items, which prices them out of the range of below poverty line people, right? So this is extremely unethical, actually, and yet no vegan has called Earthling Ed out over this. They don't have a problem with this.
Right. For them, have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and it's worth pricing the poor out of food to get a vegan world rolling. Is that about what we're looking at with these people?
Yeah, they're extreme hypocrites.
I guess that puts it lightly, doesn't it? Very lightly.
They don't matter to you.
So I think there are a lot more people in the world suffering right now as a result of things such as not being able to access enough food, not being able to access a high quality of food. So I feel like things like them not being able to eat animal products, them being able to consume things which might not be ethically sourced, I think that would improve their quality of life more than, say, if the world was 3 degrees cooler.
But what about you? You know, you accepted that eating animal products is bad for the environment. We recognize that the environmental damage is bad because it destroys people's homes, it destroys people's ability to grow food, basically it increases suffering.
Yeah.
So we increase human suffering as a result of climate change, and you recognize that meat, dairy, and egg consumption is a driver of climate change. And it is.
So there's the big lie right there, right? He just told one of the big lies, which is that livestock agriculture is the big driver of climate change.
Yeah, and he doesn't really quantify how much of a driver it actually is in comparison to crop agriculture or to other sectors of the economy, actually. When you look at a global scale, I think the recent FAO data says that animal agriculture is like 11% globally in terms of emissions. So even from a global perspective, relative to other sectors, that's not that huge. And it's not even factoring in a true life cycle analysis of crop agriculture and what a vegan world would actually require.
It's also being looked at as man-made. And when we look at the fact that, as we were talking about earlier, the number of animals that the same amount of land is supporting now as compared to 300 years ago, is that depending on where you are, it's either the same or less today than existed in the past. So trying to take 100 million ruminants and saying man is that the emissions associated with that are not natural and man-made, that is a natural and very important part of the carbon cycle, is grazing ruminants. Has always been and will always be. And so the fact that you've got some scientists that are willing to even label it as a part of the man-made emissions picture, those scientists, one and all, are intellectually dishonest with their audience, because these emissions that are associated with these animals are supposed to be here. They're supposed to be those emissions. The emissions that aren't part of the historical carbon cycle is all of these petroleum carbons that are pulled out of the ground and then added to the atmospheric. That's the new. That, in other words, like the nitrogen, the synthetic nitrogen that's required to grow all the soybeans that would be required in a vegan world, that synthetic nitrogen is made with methane, and it's got huge numbers as far as methane emissions, and it also burns gargantuan amounts of methane to produce the heat that's required to produce synthetic nitrogen. So it's a petroleum dependent process. Again, just you could write books, you could write a series of novels about the portions of a vegan world that are not being disclosed to the public, and this ongoing propaganda they're drowning us in. is that they never their metadata and their the studies that they bring to the table, none of them look at the big picture and the emissions that come from things like synthetic nitrogen production, etc.
Yeah, and
It's a serious
also,
environmental concern. On top of that, we recognize that the consumption of animal products increases suffering for animals. You may view their suffering as less, but there's still suffering that exists.
Yes.
They still matter in some way, of course. So by consuming animal products, you yourself have already admitted that that increases animal suffering and is a leading driver of something which is increasing human suffering. But you say that your hedonistic enjoyment of these products is more important than that. So the question is, do you agree with that statement? Are your hedonistic sensory pleasure pursuits more important than human and animal suffering?
I feel like we can't approach that as a holistic question where it's absolutely the enjoyment of eating a hamburger is greater than all the human and animal suffering which is caused by the meat industry as a whole. I consume a very, very marginal fraction of the amount of products here.
So does everyone. But everyone consuming a marginal amount contributes to the problem that we have now. If everyone stopped consuming that marginal amount, it would no longer be a problem. So we are, as individuals, responsible for what we as a collective are causing.
Now we have to say
Game.
We'll stop it there. It's got a commercial now, but
I find this argument funny that Earthling Ed makes, because vegans always say, when you confront them about crop deaths, then they say, oh, we're just a tiny portion of the population, right? This is sort of their defense that they bring up.
yeah, right.
So, but when you're a meat eater and you're purchasing something, then all of a sudden the weight of the world is on your shoulders, right? But vegans, when you confront them about their misdeeds and contributing to a system that kills animals or destroys the environment, then, oh, we're just a tiny portion of the population. Our individual choices don't matter in a great scheme of things. It's kind of funny how you can actually use their arguments.
The reason that's not honest is because the reason that we're having this conversation to begin with is that they want eating meat or using animals in any way for food to be a criminal act. So they're actually trying to affect legislation on a global scale that would mandate a global veganism. And so that if you can't find meat at the grocery store or the supermarket, then a lot of people say, well, I'll just go out and I will kill an animal and eat it. Well, you might do that. But they're talking about, like in Oregon, vegans been pushing this legislation through. It has failed so far, but they just keep renaming it and presenting it again and again and again. And it would criminalize hunting. So it not only criminalizes all animal agriculture in the state of Oregon, but it also would criminalize all hunting and all fishing.
Yeah.
So
This is also kind of what they talked about at the World Economic Forum recently. There was the CEO of an organization called, I think it was called Stop the Ecocide or something, or Stop International Ecocide. And this woman talked about how fishing and farming should be treated like genocide in a legal sense.
yeah.
So this is kind of scary.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you would if you were consistent with that, then that would affect also lethal crop protection measures, and as well as incidental deaths, like you might right now a farmer that's growing crops for the vegan menu, lots of them are going to be in trouble because when they spray it doesn't matter whether it's the synthetic nitrogen, whether it's phosphorus, whether it's some kind of pesticide that's designed to kill. When a big rain comes in and causes runoff, then those agrochemicals, they're toxic, and they're going to get into the local streams and tributaries and rivers, and it's going to kill. They have it all the time. They have what they call fish kills, and they'll have a portion of the river that gets choked up with millions and millions and millions and millions of dead fish. And it's caused by the crop agriculture that produces the items on the vegan menu. And that, under these types of laws, would also be a criminal act. And so, you're talking about legislation that would outright cause a famine, because you'd shut down all farming around the world, whether or not it's animal farming or crop farming. They're the measures that they're threatening, the legislation that they're threatening to push through, would simply criminalize all agriculture, plant and animal. And
Yeah,
there's
but
lots of misanthropes in the vegan community that love the sound of that. But for the rest of the sane world, we have to deal with the fact that these big groups like the WEF and the meat packing industry, ironically, is behind all. They're behind the effort to make that a reality. They're cooperating with it. They're cooperating with what has been a stated goal of these people.
yeah. Are we gonna continue watching the Earthling ads video, or do we get
yeah,
into a different topic?
we can go to another topic if you've got one in mind.
Yeah. So there's this documentary called Patent for Pig. I think this is something that people should check out. Wait, I will try to share my screen again. So this is a very important documentary. It's called Monsanto Patent for Pig. I think it's a German documentary.
Do something real quick. Go over and click that theater mode or a theater view down there on the bottom of the video that you've got open right there.
Mm-hmm.
That way the video is a lot bigger for us and the audience to see it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, should we watch a little bit of it?
Yeah, do you have can you find a part that would be
I think every part of it is
all of it? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that, wasn't saying that it wasn't all good, but just any part of it. Let's watch it from the beginning.
Yeah, the thing about that is I think this is realistic on how they sort of could bring down animal agriculture, because they're pursuing lab-grown meat. And what you have to understand about that is they own the protein sequence on that lab-grown meat, or they have a patent on it, right? It's intellectual property. And that way they can consolidate the market and drive competitors out of business, because it's a patent violation if you have the same protein sequence or the same genes that they have a patent on, right? Like Monsanto tried to have a patent for pig genes for certain protein sequences, and then farmers, for example, in Germany, were in fear that they would not be allowed to then grow their own pigs, right? Because it would be a patent violation. So it's sort of a very scary scenario where they could practically own natural resources via intellectual property.
Like a famine by patent.
Yeah, kind of like at least a consolidation of the market of animal agriculture.
Food tyranny by patent.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fleisch.
Food monopoly.
An application for a patent on pigs.
Es geht ganz einfach um die Einforderung von Lizenzen auf geistiges Eigentum.
Are pigs an invention or the common property of all of us? Who owns the pig?
Es geht um die Patentierung, um die Privatisierung von Gensequenzen.
Genes on pig DNA, decoded and described by the Monsanto Corporation of America. But these genes have always been there. Will we soon be forced to pay fees for nature's heritage?
It is a very, very big business plan, and it includes control of food, from the seed in the field to the fork.
The politically charged patent is soon to go into effect worldwide. Christoph Zimmer, a farmer from Swabia, sees his livelihood in jeopardy. Is he soon to be prohibited from breeding pigs because their genetic material belongs to a corporation?
Now, they had the patent in effect and they revoked and principle again.
Your sound is
the actual driver behind. What is with my sound?
Your sound was messed up as far as what I could hear. I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Okay, I was saying that they had this patent in effect for a few years, and then it got revoked because farmers got together and had it revoked. However, I think that this is in the same principle. They try the same again with lab-grown meat, and I think this is the actual reason behind the push for lab-grown meat. I think this is the actual reason behind it.
Control of food, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And by the way, this is a German mainstream media documentary. This wasn't a mainstream media, right? This is not some amateur documentary.
This is an amateur?
No, this is not.
This is not. This is a mainstream media in Germany?
Yeah.
So people in Germany are being shown this on a grand scale compared to other countries. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe a few years ago, but not anymore.
Okay, so this was from 2006. But this was a documentary that lots of Germans would have seen or talked about.
Yeah, maybe a few.
Maybe a few. But it was a mainstream. This is a mainstream production.
Yeah. But it's amazing what they actually show there. And they, for example, go into how GMO soy or animal feed led to lower fertility or even sterilization among certain farm animals.
Christoph Zimmer is now traveling through Germany with patent applications for pig genes in his briefcase. He wants to shake up the other farmers to protest against the sellout of life, as he calls it.
Wie kann denn jemand ein Patent auf Dinge beanspruchen, die es schon gibt? Da kann er gleich ein Patent auf Sonnenlicht beanspruchen oder dass man hier zum Kinderkriegen ein Patent braucht und nicht dann Lizenzgebühren abführen muss.
The discontented farmer believes that these piglets might also be affected by the patents the American agricultural concern Monsanto is applying for, because the genes cited therein are not an invention, but already exist in almost all pigs. As proof, Zimmer wants to collect some hair for a DNA test.
Also hier kann man jetzt die Gene untersuchen an der Haarwurzel. Und Monsanto behauptet jetzt, wenn dieses Gen hier vorhanden ist, dann sind die Tiere besonders wüchsig, besonders fleischstark.
Yeah, I mean, this is how I think that animal agriculture can be destroyed. It is through intellectual property and driving small-scale farming out of business with this intellectual property, suing farmers if they violate patents, right? This is basically the principle, I think, what they might be doing.
We have that with the soybean industry and the corn industry already, where the organic heirloom, I guess you might call it, versions of all of the patented crops so far, people have lost their farms simply because of wind drift. The wind blows a patented seed onto the property of a farmer who doesn't have a license for that patent, and then Monsanto sues them, and then the farmer spends the value of the farm fighting the lawsuit. They have to sell the lawsuit, or they have to sell the farm to pay the bills that come along with the lawsuit, and then it's purchased by someone that's going to play ball with Monsanto and plant their patented seeds and pay for it on an annual basis.
Right. And the similar principle can be applied to animal agriculture and their patent on protein sequences, and it will not be by accidental wind drift that the lawsuits are going to be handed out, right? So this affects not just small scale farming, but things like backyard chickens, maybe, right? So this is against food self-sustainability, right? So this is very dangerous if through the lab-grown meat production, because they take the cells from animals, right? They take it from chickens, they take it from cows, from pigs, and then they can claim, oh, we own these protein sequences now, and if you have animals on your farm or backyard chickens or whatever that have these protein sequences that we have a intellectual property rights over, then you cannot do business with that, or we sue you, right? So
Yeah.
that's how I think, or that's I think the main reason why this lab-grown meat stuff is being pushed so heavily. I think this is the actual reason behind it. And well, guess what? The vegans are pushing lab-grown meat, right?
Yes, they're debating amongst themselves of would you eat it, and a lot of them are saying, yeah. I mean, there's no animals that are harmed. I mean, that was one of so-called reasonable vegans, Carson's persona was that, yeah, I'd eat lab-grown meat in a second because it's not harming any animal, just the meat. And it's really not just the meat. that lab-grown meat requires a type of cell that just keeps dividing and dividing and dividing continuously, and that's a type of cell that is cancerous. And so it's like when you talk about lab-grown meat, you're talking about lab-grown tumors in reality.
Yeah, what is interesting about that is that these vegans, they will promote, I mean, even if it wasn't cancerous, but vegans always say that eating red meat leads to cancer or to heart attacks or to diabetes. But they then also promote lab-grown meat, which they claim is basically similar to meat, which is weird because they're also saying that meat causes all these diseases. So on one hand, you say meat causes disease. On the other hand, you're promoting meat just because it's lab-grown meat. So it's kind of weird, you know.
It
And
depends. It depends on the vegan. There are I think the vegans that would claim that it's healthy are probably in the minority. The majority, I think, would say that meat, whether it's lab grown or otherwise, would be unhealthy. So that's just my guess that most of them would be anti. I mean, I know that some of the big influencers, but some of the carnivore influencers, big ones, have endorsed a future with lab grown meat as well.
they have endorsed lab-grown meat.
Yeah. Or just at least, yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you're a big influencer and you say that it's only a matter of time before the process of making it is perfected and it's nutritious. So if you say that as like part of your persona opinion, as a huge Joe Rogan affiliated type influencer, then you have to know that everything that comes out of their mouth is paid for. You don't just end up on Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan saw your post and was like, I'm going to have that guy on. That's not how it works. That's not how it works at that level. Everything is scripted. Not, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ad libbing, but the general itinerary of each Joe Rogan guest is it's scripted, and some of the guests are in on the joke and some of them aren't.
Yeah, I mean, there's both corruption in the vegan and in the carnivore community. But for example, Lifting Vegan Logic promotes lab-grown meat, and I think he had a guy from the Good Food Institute on as an interview, right? And the Good Food Institute promotes or produces this lab-grown meat.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also getting funded from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I just have to wonder about Lifting Vegan Logic and his, conflict of interest that he might have, I'm just speculating.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Are there any vegans in the comments?
I don't think so. I didn't see any. I bet that Jeffrey guy is out there. he doesn't want to embarrass himself, so he's probably not going to comment tonight.
Yeah, I mean, if Jeffrey's out there, he can come on stream, and then we'll confront him about the soybeans and
Oh yeah, this would be a good opportunity for him to do that.
Yeah, I mean, how is he going to explain the market report that I've just shown, which states that soybean oil has greater influence on soybean planting decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had me concede. Essentially, what he had me concede to was that human beings do not eat biodiesel made from soybeans. They consume it in their vehicles. That was a win. They tried to turn that into a big win for them when I never did say that human beings were eating biodiesel. I said that they were consuming it in their vehicles, not as cooking oil or anything edible, but eating is consuming. Consuming is not always eating. And most honest people admit that.
Yeah. But this is a semantics game that he wanted to play, I guess.
Well, I think he was coached into that by Chris. And I think Chris was coached into it by Rams, David. I think David was actually coached by Carbstrong, but I'm not sure.
Well, wasn't Joey Carbstrong also on a live stream here?
Yeah, there was a controversy as to whether that was the real Joey Carbstrong or not. It's not the same avatar, but it does sound like a fellow Australian and a real animal activist, authentic, but pretending to be Carbstrong for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, he can come on and see how much he cares about the crop depth.
Well, he did show up in comments of one of my the real Joey Carbstrong did show up in the comments of one of my vegan kill cult videos and completely destroyed him in a debate, and it's still there for people that want to read it. I can't remember right offhand which video it's under, but I think he's at the top, and it was all the same old excuses like, the animals hear the heavy machinery coming, therefore they get out of the way, so most of them don't get caught up in the combine harvesters, etc. All the way to, well, it doesn't matter anyway because most of those crops are grown to feed the animals, and that's their two big go-tos. And they make you work for it, but they'll eventually concede that they're wrong if you get them cornered, like I did with Jeffrey Phillips and Chris Hines. Is I did have them cornered, and they did admit that there would be more crops in a vegan world, which is the larger debate, which is above the soybean debate. The soybean debate is a subset or a subcategory within the bigger debate, which is more important, which is admitting that the factory crop, industrial agriculture, that produces the items on the vegan menu kills quadrillions and quadrillions times more animals than does animal agriculture every year. And a vegan world will increase that destructive crop agriculture. And you've proved that. I've proved that. We'll continue to prove that. And hopefully we'll get those links up so that people can use them, because one of the reasons I think there's not been a big pushback against the vegan movement on these issues is that people have been without, the vegan side has got all of these documentaries that they've made, these propagandas like Game Changers and this and that, and the opposing side has not been organized. And this is not a huge organization, but I don't think it takes just a small amount of truth to stomp out a whole lot of lies. And
Yeah. I mean, it's also very interesting that a lot of these vegan documentaries, they come from Netflix and Hollywood, Hollywood productions, right? So I have not seen much grassroots documentaries from these vegan documentaries. It's always a big Hollywood production or some kind of Netflix production.
yeah, some kind of Hollywood affiliated, Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Cameron, both affiliated with the Communist Party of China, were on the payroll of admittedly on the payroll of the Communist Party of China. So, man, it's ridiculous. I see you've got these links. I'll move them over to the public real quick. There's one.
Yeah, I think James Cameron, didn't he also have something to do with vegan supplements or vegan food creation? I think there was some conflict of interest there, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember. With James Cameron, you're saying there was a conflict of interest with his participation in some vegan propaganda?
Yeah,
Huh. It keeps changing. It's strange. I can't paste all of those articles because it's posting the same one over. Wait, no. Oh, that last one was correct. Never mind. Okay, as you were saying.
Yeah, I think a lot of these vegan documentaries have conflict of interest. For example, we said Game Changers. I think the director of that, I think he's also affiliated with Blue Horizon Ventures. So
Who is? Oh, Cameron?
No, not Cameron. I think the director of Game Changers.
Oh, the director. Makes sense. Yeah, Mr. Screw Your Freedom Did you see Arnold Schwarzenegger say that?
No. Wait, someone asked here in the chat, wait, where was this comment? About whether or not the dropout rate of veganism would halt the whole process. Where was this comment? Yeah. I have a question for both of you. Do you think the extremely high vegan dropout rate will prevent the vegan apocalypse? Most vegans quit within a few years due to health complications.
I don't think that the whether or not, if I thought that our chances of having a vegan future revolved around whether or not people went there willingly, is not my concern. And I think that's what that question kind of assumes, is that veganism is being pushed by some sincere group of people. And I don't think that's the case. I think that the case is that I know that the WEF has stated that beyond us owning nothing and being happy, that we will be eating little, if any, meat in the future. And I've looked at the list of corporations around the world that have signed on as strategic partners of the WEF. And amongst those corporations are the big meat packers. So the meat packers have signed on with this anti-meat agenda. And if you look at what those meat packers are doing, is that they're changing. They're going through a metamorphosis right now, and they're buying up vegetable protein companies. They're buying out pea protein. They're making contracts with pea protein, all different types of plant protein. These companies that traditionally would be selling us beef and chicken, they're now going to slowly start. They're not going to be meat companies anymore. They're going to be protein companies, and the big profit margins are in the plant protein category. And that's the future that they see for themselves as far as their financials is a vegan world. The thing is that these corporations provide such a large percentage of the world's meats that they alone can dictate a vegan future simply by refusing to provide real meat at the supermarket where they're contracted to provide food. So I think there's going to be meat in the future supermarket, but I think it's going to be cost prohibitive, to say the least. It's going to be very, very, very expensive. And the plan is for the majority of the protein that people consume, the vast, vast, vast majority, to come from plants. And it's not whether or not willing vegans have a high dropout rate or not that's threatening that to happen. What's threatening that to happen is the corporations that provide our meat are doing things that look like they're preparing to all but stop providing that meat, and providing mostly plant proteins.
Yeah, when you look at, for example, the 40 Cities group, I think it was called, right? There's an organization called 40 Cities Group.
Okay.
It's also affiliated with the WEF, and they have stated that they want a shift to plant-based diets. It's headed by many mayors around the world in 40 cities. I think the mayor of London, Khan, was among them. And this plan or this sort of policy that they want to
Agenda?
this what they want to implement is I think 40 grams or something a year, right? Meat consumption or something like
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
I cannot remember the exact number of grams per year or per day, but a very small amount of meat that they want to have us to eat in our diets. And I looked it up, and it was way less than a quarter of a normal steak. So I think per day. So, and also when you look at the Eat Lancet diet, it also has a similar, very, very low amount of meat that we are allowed to eat on that diet. And the Eat Lancet or the Eat Forum is connected to companies like Bayer and Nestle, and also a Saudi prince that apparently funds the vegan media outlet Plant-Based News.
I remember seeing something about that. Yes.
Which is also interesting. And that Saudi prince is tied to the X Prize Foundation, which also promotes veganism or wants to have a competition between different alternative protein startups that produce substitutes for real chicken and fish and stuff like that. And they're also affiliated again with the World Economic Forum. So you have Plant-Based News actually indirectly tied to the World Economic Forum. And Plant-Based News hosts all these different vegan activists like Joey Carbstrong, Earthling Ads, Chris McCaskill from Plant Jumpers, and many others. So you can, I mean, if you vegans have a favorite vegan influencer and they're on Plant-Based News on that YouTube channel or contribute to that media organization, well, then indirectly you're consuming WEF approved content.
Yeah. They don't expose anything WEF, and they don't deny that they support that agenda with the WEF. They kind of, in fact, I think I've seen Jeffrey lately kind of gloating about the idea that, the powers that may be might be willing to enforce by threats of violence, a vegan mandate around the world. Just see them light up with delight when that idea of a tyrannical vegan mandate being implemented. You really see them glow with glee, because that's what they want. Above any benefit for the animals is a hatred for mankind, and that's what I've seen in most of your typical hardcore vegan activist. Because you have to what we do have to face about your typical vegan is that your typical vegan is going to drop out in a short period of time and probably talk bad about veganism from then on. So your typical average vegan who's not an activist is going to drop out in a short period of time and probably will say, wow, I had a stint with veganism, almost killed me. So glad to be eating eggs again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's great that people are recovering from veganism, but I think those people should also be more proactive and get together and
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
because
They owe it to their fellow mankind to warn them about how bad it is, how bad veganism is.
yeah, and
they
also
know. They've been there. They know.
yeah, and a lot of vegan influencers that influence these people, ex-vegans should sue them. I mean, they should get together and have a team of lawyers and then hand out the lawsuits. I mean, they're just vegan influencers giving out reckless advice that could lead you to have a shorter life, so to speak. So,
and the corporations that are pushing them forward, that are paying them to do this, do you think?
yeah, I mean, there needs to be more ex-vegans that are lobbying the government to stop or to put an end to this vegan propaganda and misinformation, because this could spiral out of control into a public health crisis. And for example, there are many vegan organizations like the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is a PETA front, and they have actually been featured on Quack Watch, right? So they're actually recognized as quacks, right? And
yeah,
so
Quack Watch.
Yeah, and what my question is, why they're still allowed to spew that propaganda on YouTube?
Well, did you ever see David Rams joking that people should call farmers and give death threats to farmers? And then he qualified that and said, second thought, send death threats to animal farmers specifically. And then he said, no, I'm joking. But he said that after myself and others kind of pointed to the fact that whether or not you're joking, when you're a vegan activist that has said some pretty politically incorrect things, that was never a confusion as to what was being said, to all of a sudden say, well, I was joking when I said send death threats to farmers, because the fact is that in this world, vegans do send death threats to farmers, and they also send death threats to restaurants that serve meat, and they send death threats to even farmers' children have been threatened. So it's serious business when a vegan starts joking about sending death threats to a farmer. To me, that's something that shouldn't be tolerated. There's lots of things that, are allowed to be said, and that's certainly worse than a lot of things that can't be said, by far. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube allowed this content is beyond me, because YouTube actually has experienced violence from a vegan firsthand in their headquarters. So if you know that incident,
I'm aware of it. I have a theory on what that actually was, but yes, I know that story, and according to that story, it was a vegan that did that, and there's been more than one of these events who the assailant was a vegan, and so it's a theme. But there are other themes that we can't talk about on this forum that also interweave with all of that, and but anyway, it's a big mess.
yeah, I just hope that if any vegans are watching this, then please explain to me how you're morally superior if your diet actually causes more animal deaths and it sends children to the hospital and results in environmental destruction. Like, how can you still claim moral superiority?
I think I hear one vegan in the back, and he's saying over and over again, he's saying one word. It's like corpse, corpse, corpse. So he's run out of arguments. He's been debunked on everything, and now just you're eating dead bodies, becomes like the last thing they do is just start trying to throw as many labels on you and make you sound like a bloodthirsty heathen vampire, hateful, all the other facts that present the fact that they're killing more animals. They're going to go ahead and ignore it. And it goes back to saying, how could you eat a corpse? How could you be a monster and eat a corpse? That's disgusting. Which again sheds light on the fact that veganism is not about the animals. If it's out of sight and out of mind, that's okay. If there's an animal that's dying for their salad, they don't want to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the arguments that, for example, Carnism Debunked made in his video, which I responded to recently, he made just for like the first 4 minutes of his video, he made just appeal to emotions, like, oh, would you rather watch slaughterhouse footage, or would you watch how broccolis get harvested?
Yeah. So they show a pig in a cage, and a distressed pig in a cage, and then flip around and show a tractor that's spraying some mist. It looks like they're watering the plants with a tractor or something. It makes it look as benign as possible. But all of the animals, he doesn't have any of the animals. Like I was thinking, if he's going to show any animals that are supposedly suffering in animal agriculture, animal slaughter, then what that should be juxtaposed against is not a tractor spraying something on the crops, but show a bunny rabbit that's eaten agricultural rodenticides, and show it having convulsions, and show the rabbit with bloody froth coming out of its mouth as it would in its last dying days of what can be 2 weeks of slowly bleeding to death internally, just so these crops that produce the items on the vegan menu can be made available. And so, his failure to compare apples to apples is just another example of how veganism is just, it's one intellectual dishonesty after another. There's just like a Rolodex of lies that they flip through and give you them one at a time. It's the circular reasoning that it's got so many steps to the circle that you forget what you were talking about by the time they get around to surpassing what they started with and starting the whole argument over again, which is always this emotional plea to, don't you think it would be a better world if we didn't kill animals? And, okay, let's pretend that we live in this Walt Disney movie for a moment. Yeah, that would be better. However, here we live in reality, and the alternative, you're telling me that my diet is wrong. You have an alternative, and that alternative is better. But whenever we look at what you've proposed as the alternative to a meat-based diet or an omnivore diet with meat in it, is a 100% plant-based diet called a vegan diet. And that's going to actually kill quadrillions more of animals than if I was an omnivore or a meat-based eater. And why do you have the moral high ground here exactly? I mean, you don't, but why do you think that you do? Veganism has the lowest of all the different ways that you can eat. When it comes to animal death and suffering, veganism is the worst. Didn't you show that today? Didn't you show that?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's, I would say, one of the least sustainable diets in terms of food security, long-term food security. I cannot imagine a less sustainable diet from a food security standpoint than a vegan diet.
Have you seen the movie Idiocracy?
No.
Yeah, I think it was predictive programming. Some people say it was a documentary. It was sold as comedy, but the premise is that there's this military soldier that enters this experiment. They end up putting him into some type of suspended animation in this little pod, and ends up getting forgotten about back there, and decades and hundreds of years go by, I guess. And when he wakes up, everyone is an idiot, pretty much. He's the smartest person in the world now. And there's a famine going on because they started watering the crops with some type of sports drink. And the reasoning behind it was based on some slogan that the marketing department of this sports drink had come up with, which it's got what plants need, electrolytes. And so everyone on Earth is starving to death because they can't get past this corporate propaganda that was put out to sell a product. And as a result of them following the advice of some sports drink corporation, the entire earth now was being threatened with famine. And that's similar to veganism, where that's exactly where that would take us, is an idiocracy type world. Famine being included in one of many parallels between that movie and veganism.
Yeah, I mean, the vegans are pretty much useful idiots for corporations, and they're just mindlessly repeating the same talking points over and over and over again. You can just basically make a list of different kinds of talking points that vegan is gonna say, and he's at least gonna say some of these talking points that you can already predict in advance, like, oh, it takes more crops to feed a cow than to feed a human being, for example. It's one of the many things they say. Or the majority of crops are grown for animals, or animal agriculture is a climate destroyer, and things like that. Always the same nonsense. Or name the trait, the name the trait argument.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say to the name the trait argument, by the way, is that this argument assumes that we value things necessarily based on logic or on some clear identifiable trait, but this is not necessarily the case. A lot of things we value subjectively, psychologically. So we don't need to have a specific moral reason why we value human beings over animals. The same way.
Let me tell you quickly the real reply to that. The real reply is, no, vegan, you're the one that needs to name the trait. What is the trait that's possessed by the cute little bunny rabbit that's returned to his territory, that was bulldozed, plowed up, and now has a monocrop of spinach? So he's come back home and there's all of this food everywhere. And the farmer's paying gunmen out there to shoot him in the head or the gut or the leg, whatever they can hit, is shoot him as many times as possible or as necessary to kill him or to leave him kicking, but knowing he's going to die later because they don't waste ammunition. So what is the trait that's possessed by that bunny that isn't possessed by, or what is the trait of the animal that is going to be killed and eaten that makes you care about that animal and you don't care about the bunny that's dying because it was in the fields that grow your vegan salad? Name that trait. What is the trait that makes the bunny's life, the bunny's suffering, not matter, not considerable? You're not considering it. Why? What's the trait? So it's not me that needs to name the trait. It's you that needs to name the trait, because you're saying that it's okay for these animals to die for your food.
Yeah, I think this is a good point. they might be saying that the trait is that they're rights violators or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but yes, but we debunked that already because we said that this bunny returned home. It was living out there in nature in a wild meadow, and the people that came before the farmer but were working for the farmer, they had bulldozers. They cleared all that out. They killed a bunch of animals, destroyed a bunch of homes. That it has to be understood by everyone that is if we're going to start counting rights violations, hey vegans, you skipped that one when you bulldozed all these wild animals' homes and turned it into a plowed field, and you got rid of all the trees, you got rid of all the different species of bushes and grasses and legumes and just a plethora of life, and you got rid of all of that. You turned it into a monocrop, and then when those animals came back, the ones that weren't killed already by the industry that produces your menu, the ones that weren't killed already, the ones that came back to their home, were then handed their second rights violation by either being poisoned to death or being shot to death, or being trapped and gassed, or being blown up with explosives. So if we're going to name the trait, then the person that's eating the diet that's responsible for the most amount of animal deaths, and that's vegans by quadrillions every year. So if someone needs to name the trait, it's them. They're the ones that need to name the trait, because otherwise, then the only argument they have is it's not whether or not you kill them, it's whether or not you eat them, because that's all they're left with. That's all they're left with, because they're killing more. All they can say is, yeah, we're killing quadrillions more, but we're not eating them. That's all they're left with. That's all. And that's an empty veganism. If it's not about the animals, and it's about, well, kill as many animals as you want, but don't eat them, that becomes the new veganism.
Yeah.
That actually is the current veganism. It's just not explained that way.
Yeah, or they say the animal extinctions are actually a good thing.
Now you're getting to the nutrivore mindset.
Yeah.
They're literally, their logic leads straight to, if it were carried out, a completely barren, lifeless planet, no life.
Yeah, like
no life, no suffering. Good. That's their perspective.
I don't even think they really want that, because they are not the types of people that want to be in an uncomfortable world where they, or in a post-apocalyptic wasteland or anything like that. They're just spouting this nonsense out of desperation because they cannot debunk the crop devs argument. So they're saying that, oh, the crop devs are actually a good thing because it prevents potential future animal predation. And yeah, this is.
And then he says, and who knows, maybe if there was all of this biodiversity out there, then that biodiversity would include a lot of predators. A lot of predators means a lot of animal suffering. So, probably have to do all the math. But I'm, as a vegan, I think that making everything a sterile monocrop on an ongoing basis probably causes less animal suffering and death than if it was just a wild forest.
Yeah, I mean, I have not heard, not only heard nutrivores say something like that, but also vegan gains who said that deforestation might be a good thing for the animals.
Right.
So I think we're slowly moving in that direction of vegan school of thought that thinks animal extinctions are actually a good thing for the animals, even though the animals actually show signs that they want to live. So
yeah. If they realized how ironic their theology is compared to the effect that they're actually having.
so some vegans should come on stream at some point, or maybe another day. Would be kind of fun.
Yeah, I think that it would be. There's got to be some vegans out there that are willing to sit around the campfire and talk about these issues. Maybe we can reach out to Chris Hines.
Yeah, I mean, you meant that he conceded on the fact that there would be more crops in a vegan world. So we can. I mean, I wonder if he would still agree with that, but there's no denying that this would be the case.
Let's see if I can pull that video up.
Oh yeah, Vegan Gain did say that he wants to kill all predator animals. So, and even jail predator animals. Amazing.
All right. Go on, pull it up real quick. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah.
Approved
Can
of
hear.
wrong.
Oh, okay.
Vegan activists started out by saying that their diet does not kill animals.
Why do you choose to pay for murder when you can just be vegan?
I proved them wrong with my Vegan Kill Cult series. So then they admitted that factory crop agriculture does cause untold gargantuan amounts of animal suffering and death, as well as environmental destruction, but claimed that the vast majority of crops are grown to feed livestock, especially soy.
If you're worried about animals being killed in the production of soy, then maybe you should stop supporting the industries that use 3/4 to 4/5 of all the soy that is produced.
Then I proved, using the vegans' own citations, that 92.49% of the world's soybeans are processed to extract the soybean oil, and 100% of that oil is consumed by humans. The byproduct left behind after soybean oil extraction, called soybean meal, is then sold as a livestock feed for a handsome profit. This implies that the vegans' goal of eradicating all livestock from the earth would not decrease destructive factory soybean cropping because of the ongoing demand for soybean oil. So the vegans then claimed that if they do succeed in criminalizing meat and eradicating farm animals, that destructive soybean oil cultivation would be replaced by massively increasing palm oil production, since there would no longer be, according to these vegan activists, a market for soybean meal as livestock feed.
So chances are what's going to happen is that if everything gets turned on its head, they're not going to bother using soil because it'd be inefficient, and they will move to another oil. And if they move to something like palm, for example, which only uses a very small amount of land compared to soy, there could be a huge, huge difference in the amount of crops that are grown, the amount of land that's used.
Well, it's about a yield, right?
However, there's a couple of major flaws in their story. For one, palm oil cultivation is already causing massive deforestation and habitat destruction. Secondly, if vegans succeed in robbing us of available animal-sourced nutrition, there will be a deficit of more than 128 trillion grams of high-quality protein globally, which will have to be replaced, and then some, because plant protein is less digestible and less bioavailable. Soy protein, while less than ideal because of deficiencies, can be extracted from soybean meal. So when I confronted two of these vegan activists about where they expected us to source our protein in a vegan world, this is how they responded.
Can you tell me where you're getting your protein from?
It's not about where I'm
Pretty
getting
much
my
everything.
protein from.
Everything has got protein in.
Broccoli.
So 100 grams of broccoli contains only 2.8 grams of protein, while 100 grams of beef contains 26 grams of protein. Not only is broccoli abysmally low in protein, but broccoli has a protein digestibility corrected amino acid score of 0.64. This essentially means that the protein in broccoli is only 64% digestible by human beings, which means that while on paper broccoli contains 2.8 grams of protein per every 100 grams, the reality is even more pathetic. 1.792 grams of protein per every 100 grams of broccoli. Suffice to say, while vegans like to prance around screeching that a well-planned vegan diet offers all the nutrients your body needs, they've actually not come up with a plan at all to make a vegan world succeed in anything but massive global starvation. I've offered to help them iron out the deficiencies in their plan. Let's see if they follow through.
So what I think what we'll do after we wrap this up tonight
Yes,
is
we might need to come back to
get
this.
back together.
Yeah, we'll do
and
some
then
research.
We can figure out how much crop agriculture will have to increase.
Sure.
In a vegan world.
Sure.
We can speculate.
We can estimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I notice a difference when I take.
So yeah, you heard them agree that there would be some amount. They were willing to discuss how much, but the agreement was there. Crop agriculture will increase in a vegan world.
Yeah, this is inevitable. And also, what you mentioned there about the protein content of broccoli,
Yeah.
I think this was even overestimating it, because the PDCAS is known to overestimate the protein of plants. So,
Oh yeah.
which is why it was replaced by the diaz.
Yeah, you can add another segment to that easily and bring it down even lower for sure. No doubt. And then the fact that it's also got beyond protein, like we were talking earlier, it doesn't have any of the essential amino acids. I mean, other essential nutrients. Sorry, I probably heard dogs going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, for example, amino acid lysine is practically in almost no plants. I think the only is soy. So it's very limiting amino acid that you can almost find nowhere else except in animal foods. So that means that we would have to rely massively on soy in a vegan world. Massively.
Massively, yes. And no pets either. No pets in a vegan world. Because remember they were talking about the vegan scenario would cut the amount of feed grown for animals down to 1% or level 1 on their scale. I don't think that the same number of pets could be maintained on that number. So I think a vegan world would include getting rid of most pets.
Yeah, or they would try to put them on a vegan diet with supplements.
Yeah.
Giving cats taurine supplements.
Yeah. Yeah, it's odd. Vegans are all for feeding a vegan diet to these animals, and they know that this research is going on, and lots of animals are they're suffering and dying in these experiments trying to put together a cocktail of industrially manufactured, processed, plant-based kibble for cats and dogs. Got a lot of cats and dogs out there dying slow, miserable deaths as a result of the trial and error that goes on with these companies trying to manufacture a bona fide vegan alternative to dog or cat food long term. Because again, it's like with humans, you have a vegan walk up or get online, I've been vegan for 48 years and I look great and I'm this, someone's hiding. They don't have their face out there. This is just some persona. They can make any claim. There's nothing to back it up. And even if they could, you have 40 years of video proving everything that you ate during that time. Even there, if you did, you're not talking about a lifelong vegan that was born by vegan parents who conceived you when they were vegans, and you as the offspring of 2 lifelong vegans also produced offspring. There's no long-term studies to show that there's any future for a species that's not eating a species specific diet.
Yeah. And I also always say to that, if someone says, I've been vegan for 20 years or 40 years or whatever, I always say to that, okay, but there are also people who smoke 20 years or 40 years. So what? Does this mean that it's healthy? No.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it can be done for 20 years. I think that my opinion is that any vegan that makes that claim is a cheatin, and they're cheating behind the scenes. I think that there have been studies that prove that to be the case with vegetarians. And I would say that a vegan would have even more motivation to lie and cheat.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a cult than vegetarianism is.
Yeah, I actually found some data on vegan cheating rates. Wait, let me get this. There's a 50% cheat rate, I think. Wait a second.
What was the cheat rate you said?
This comes from this survey. Many vegetarians and vegans do eat animal products. So they had some survey data on this. And let's see. So they have different food groups: meat, chicken, eggs, cheese, and dairy. And the vegans, they do actually regularly eat cheese, for example, with up to 50%. And also a lot of eggs, apparently regularly. This was based on some questionnaire data. Think of 1,600 participants or something. Yeah, 1,629 consumers. Now I don't know if this was self-selected data or randomized or anything like that, but it's nonetheless interesting. So the vegans who self-report that they eat some eggs or eat some cheese, etc., or some dairy even, seems to be quite high actually.
Wow. Yeah. I want to look at that. This is showing dairy consumption by vegans and vegetarians.
Yeah, and by flexitarians as well.
Mm-hmm.
I will put it in a private chat. Now, one can say, oh, it's, I think it's from the Dairy Council or something. So one can say, oh, it's conflict of interest. The Dutch Dairy Association. But still, I mean, there's other data that complements this. I've shown some of this in one of my videos. I think it's called Vegans versus Ex-Vegans or something.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some evidence that there are a lot of vegans who do cheat. It's hard to quantify exactly how many, but it's not a rare occurrence.
Right. So when someone says that they've been vegan for so many years, it's like, for instance, we know that reasonable vegan Carson eats mussels. He eats clams or something like that. It's full of good vitamin B12 and a bunch of other nutrients, heme iron. And he's still telling people that he's vegan and been vegan for so many years. He just changed his definition of veganism. But he's still promoting a 100% plant-based diet.
Yeah, that's unethical to do that.
I agree.
And bivalves are sentient. I saw some article by some vegan biologist or something who said that they are sentient.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the sentience argument, even with plants and bivalves, it just doesn't work with vegans. They just don't care about that at all. I think in order for a vegan to care about an animal, it has to be a version of an animal that's been featured in a movie like Bambi or Charlotte's Web all of these vegan propaganda films that for decades have been brainwashing people into thinking that animals have human characteristics.
Yeah.
Anthropomorphization. So it's not you have to remember that veganism is not based on reason or logic. It's all emotional. And they are inclined to care more about the cute animals, but the cute ones that are dying, they also look away. There's a wild bunny rabbit that dies from crop agriculture rodenticides. It's a very cute creature, but vegans don't care about that animal. It's very cute. They certainly aren't going to care about a bivalve or there's lots of them that would say that. I mean, I think most vegans would not eat a bivalve. I think that Carson is an outlier in that regard.
Yeah.
But if you say, well, there's scientists now saying that plants have a central nervous system and they communicate with each other and they suffer. That's just not going to get any ground with a vegan. You're not going to have a vegan going, wait, seriously? Are you telling me they they just can't? Plants have not been anthropomorphized. They don't have eyes. You just can't. Plants are so much different than human beings that human beings cannot empathize with plants the way they can an animal that's got eyes.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you had no empathy for animals, then you should recognize that they're important for the ecosystem that makes also human life possible. If you don't care about insects, then you don't care about all the other animals as well, because there's an interdependence there. So you cannot pick and choose actually, oh, those are the animals that I care about, and all these other animals, they can go to hell. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think for most vegans, it's just a matter of ignorance. I think that this is one of the issues that is contributing to that high dropout rate, because I do think a number of them learn that there's a lot more animal suffering, death, and environmental destruction going on in the name of the crop agriculture that produces the vegan menu than is involved in all of animal agriculture. And a lot of people don't speak up much about it, but they do come to that realization. And like you said earlier, it's too bad that more of them don't realize that they kind of they should warn others, I think.
Yeah, at least that, definitely. If not, do a class action lawsuit, because there are more ex-vegans than current vegans, and over the years there must be an accumulation of ex-vegans to the point where it's probably in the millions of ex-vegans. So those people should start an ex-vegan movement and basically all those influences that got them into this cult. There needs to be some legal action against those people because they have done damage to those ex-vegans' health, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's that's why they're influencers, because they influence. And you know how careful people are about giving legal advice or dietary advice. You can tell people what you would do, the diet that you prefer, but to tell other people what to eat really does open one up for a lot of liability if you're literally prescribing a diet. And I think people who are promoting veganism are, and as essentially are, because of the exclusions, they're they can say, well, there's lots of ways to do a vegan diet. You can do it the right way and you can do it the wrong way. Of course, there's no official right way to do it website. Everyone just has to guess and hope they don't die during their trial and error before they find out that the whole thing was a sham.
Yeah, they always use this phrase carefully planned or adequately planned. What does this mean actually? It's always so vague. This comes up even in a lot of studies. A properly or carefully planned, adequately planned, but it's
Yeah.
never specified what this actually means. How
Yeah,
long?
you'll see a lot of claims like that in studies that promote elements of the vegan diet. You'll see a lot of that language where these claims are being made in kind of a everybody knows fashion, but there's nothing in the study or even referenced that backs that claim up. It's just like everybody knows that a vegan diet is best for the environment. And you're looking at the study and you're like, where did that come from? This isn't even about that. It's about something else, and they've slipped this claim in here about veganism being better for this or that reason, and then look at the whole study. No, the whole first paragraph of the study is making a bunch of claims that the study in no way addresses or supports. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with the what they're publishing these days and calling it science, especially when it comes to science that supposedly supports the validity of a vegan diet in any way.
Yeah, it's usually very reductionist. Not caring about bioavailability, all kinds of nutrients or anti-nutrients from plants. We haven't even got into that. Plant toxins that never factored in there.
No, anti-nutrients.
Yeah, heavy metals, mycotoxins,
pesticides.
Yeah.
Well, you want to try to do this again next week?
I'm not sure if I can next week, but yeah, maybe next week or some days after next week. But yeah, sure. And maybe we can debate some vegan or discuss some some stuff with some vegan. I think this would be interesting.
I'll start putting out some community posts inviting some vegans to come on with us. We'll see what happens.
Someone asks, when is the next debate?
Debate between me and a vegan somewhere. I don't think there is anything scheduled. I thought I was going to be debating vegan gains on the Crucible, but for some reason that never happened. I don't think that vegan gains is really up for it.
Yeah, I mean, but when you had the short debate with him, he said something about what we are saying about there being more crops in a vegan world violates thermodynamics. But what he doesn't realize is that the animals, they barely eat any human edible crops or any human edible feed.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's talking about the whole trophic level thing, right? So energy in terms of calories is being lost along the way to the human. But again, he doesn't factor in protein upcycling by the cow, for example, which would be missing in a vegan world and stuff like that.
Here, Patricia says that she'll go and get us some vegans. So yeah, let's start getting some. We'll get vegans in here. We'll go 2 versus 2, and it'll be an informal conversation debate, kind of debating around the campfire scenario. And I'll be fair. The vegans aren't used to a level playing field. So if you level the playing field, they're liable to say, claim that you're cheating. But
yeah,
that's because they insist that the field is tilted in their favor. And if it's not, then things, according to them, aren't fair.
Yeah, I mean, you were debating 2 against 1, so it was unfair for you.
Yeah. And then one of the things that they talked about for like an hour in their after debate party was that things weren't fair because they had expected it to be 2 versus 1, and all of a sudden it was 2 versus 2, and they thought that was cheating. And I had no idea that they were going to bring on a partner for me. I didn't ask for it. I wasn't warned. So, but I just went along with it. I have mixed feelings about it because it is their only hook that they're hanging their hat on. Is that's one of their main claims to even having any skin after that was saying, well, it was supposed to be 2 versus 1 and it ended up 2 versus 2, and that wasn't fair. I guess that's a valid argument, but
yeah, I mean, your debate partner was more focused on the philosophical points, but I was more referring to the first debate that you had with Jeffrey and Ali.
Oh yeah, you saw that one.
Yeah,
That was a good one, right?
Yeah, but later on in the debate, they pulled up Our World and Data. They were talking about eutrophying emissions, I think.
Yes.
And it's very clear that those eutrophying emissions are more from fertilizer, right? From chemical fertilizer.
Right. So there's the eutrophying emissions from crop fertilizers, which are mostly mined and synthetically, industrially produced from petroleum products. You're talking about from those versus from the animals.
Yeah, I mean, she was bringing up some Our World and Data stuff. I think this was also Our World and Data. When they make these environmental claims, they usually cite the poor Nemesis study. Is what I have seen in like most cases.
Well, they do these they make claims based on half truths, like make the claim that crop agriculture, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's in fact it's pretty bad, but in fact it's destroying the earth. But for instance, 80% of the soy that's grown goes to feed livestock. So if you want to reduce the amount of soy, then you'd reduce the amount of livestock, agriculture out there. And of course, the lie is the lie is that you're telling people what you're communicating to people. The message they're receiving is that 80% of the soybeans that are grown to feed livestock, and so livestock are sitting there, and all of a sudden there's a big bushel of soybeans sitting in front of them that was grown for them. When in reality, 100% of the soybeans were crushed first, then they were soaked in hexane, all the oil was pulled out, and all of that oil was consumed by humans either as biodiesel or foodstuffs of some kind. And only by weight are the animals eating about 80% of it. But that's because it's not edible by humans.
Yeah, and also think about it from an economic perspective. The oil and the soybean meal, they have a similar. I mean, they're both produced by crushing, right? So we can say that roughly that it has a similar production cost to produce that. But the soybean oil is sold at a higher price, so it compensates more for the production cost, right? It gets more out of it than costs are going in. So, but the same is not true for soybean meal. So it has similar production costs, but a lower revenue per unit sold. So you're making less profit of the soybean meal, right?
Correct. Yep. That's right.
And just because there's a huge amount of soybean meal that is being produced, that does not automatically mean that there is more demand being created, because just because there's a lot of soybean meal supply does not mean that the animals all of a sudden eat more soybean meal if the animal population is roughly the same or is even declining in some areas.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Mr. Pink and Yellow. Lies based on half-truths are the most effective. Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. I would agree with that. Well, I think that we've been on here for almost 4 hours, and it's super late over there where you are.
Yeah. I have to go very soon. But yeah, I think it was informative, hopefully for people, and entertaining. So
Yeah, I think it in our niche, definitely any kindred spirits out there to us, the two of us, which I think we're kindred spirits on this issue, certainly got some things out of it. And I appreciate you sharing your research with us today and ongoing, and always encourage people to go to your channel and watch your videos and subscribe.
yeah, thank you. I'm also subscribed to my Rumble account, by the way. But yeah, Patricia asked, has anti-war mindset debated? Yes, I have debated the Nutrivore.
You have that up on your channel?
No, it's on his channel. If he hasn't shut his channel down, I don't know. It's probably still around somewhere. But yeah, it's yeah, it was a weird debate. But yeah.
Yeah. All of Nutrivore's debates are weird. And then you've got a channel on men's issues. What's it called?
Shield for Men.
Shield for Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shield for Men.
But yeah, the vegan discussions that we're gonna have, I think. Oh, Nick the Nutrivore, he raised his channel apparently. Okay.
Huh. I would like to see that, to see what apparently embarrassed him, because if he wasn't embarrassed already, I don't know what the next level would look like, but I'll have to try and see if I can find that.
Yeah, he had a debate with Sean Baker about many things, including crop deaths, and I think
I think from what I heard, it was something like well, he, just like he did with you and with me, he goes to this place where it's, well, of course we're causing suffering and death. We're trying to kill all the animals, because as soon as we kill all the animals, there will be no more suffering, because nothing will be alive. It's kind of where he takes it with everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, if we have the question, like in my debate with him, the proposition was vegans kill more animals than non-vegans, right? So we're talking about humans killing animals. We're not talking about animals killing other animals. So talking about wild predation, animals killing each other in wild predation, is irrelevant. It's a non sequitur. We're talking about humans killing animals. So if you have a hunter shooting an animal, or you have a hunter that witnesses two animals killing each other but does nothing about it, those are not the same actions, right? The one is killing and the other one is failing to prevent killing, right? So even from a logical and empirical sort of perspective, his position doesn't make any sense. So I don't need to factor in the freaking predation that goes on pasture land. He just tries to artificially inflate the numbers and tries to put a possible empirical burden on the opponent, because he knows full well that no one actually counted the amount of animal deaths that occur on wild pasture land. He knows that. So that's why it's a very desperate attempt. It's desperation.
Yeah, I agree. Desperation. See, he's at the end of his rope. He's in a corner.
Yeah, now that he got sort of put on Joe Rogan and, embarrassed him apparently. But yeah.
That's interesting. Well, let's wrap up. I've got some chores I got to go take care of tonight.
Yeah.
Before, and I know you're about to probably start a new day over there.
Yeah. All right. I hope everybody enjoyed this live stream.
Me too. Thank you all for coming. Enjoyed the conversation. Good information on this live stream. I hope everyone watches the whole thing. And we'll do it again very soon.